Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto found out about the Uzumaki clan and was a prodigy. A small twist of fate made him aware of his heritage, unsealing the legacies his parents left behind. Graduating from the academy at age 7, he's well on his way. He found a kindred spirit in Uchiha Itachi, and his cousin Shisui's along for the ride. They're on the path to unsealing the legacy left by their ancestors, both the dark and the light. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 10. 10th Legacy, Missing Pieces of History. Konoha. Naruto was on the way back to the tower, choosing an unconventional route that only a small body like his could take. Usually he could care less of the stares and whispered insults that had trailed him like a plague since he was young, and he opted to just run whenever it happened. But he is still aware whenever he gets stared at, especially when it seems like someone no less skilled than a Jonin or Umbu was following him this time. It was really hard to throw them off of him. He tried being subtle with it by laying false trails and doubling back whenever possible, but they were really good. Even Itachi and Shisui sometimes had a hard time following him. If there was one thing he was as good at as Fuinjutsu, it would be stealth, a skill born out of a twisted longing to play tag at a time when only his Umbu guards were available as playmates. He didn't even have to ask them to play, he made them play with him, chasing him through the village after a good old prank that would end in getting him a reprimand from Tori or the Hokage. That was one childish attitude he was both grateful and ashamed of. He didn't know if his stalkers knew he was aware of being followed, but if they did, they didn't show it. Only, this was starting to get annoying, and he wanted them off of his back now. It was almost hilarious how even a seasoned ninja fell to his unconventional strategies. All it took was a detour to his favorite training ground and him making a ridiculous number of Kagebunshin that enshrouded the clearing in chakra smoke. The Kagebunshin then split up in 4 groups, following their training routine as usual. It didn't take long for 4 black blurs to silently follow each group, unaware of a small insignificant pebble that was left in the empty clearing. After a long while a small puff of smoke appeared, and in place of the pebble was one Uzumaki Naruto, rubbing the back of his head. His eyes narrowed at the lush forest where his Kagebunshin and stalkers had disappeared to. What is Danzo planning? This is the 3rd time I noticed his puppets following me this week. Then again, according to Hakure's intel, that man was getting more and more restless by the recent developments between the tower and Uchiha clan. Well, the grudge he has against us is legendary, second only to Kurama's against Madara. Danzo viewed the tower as a threat because they still held love for the fallen Uzushiagaku, and as for the Uchiha. The tower, Naruto's living room. He still holds a grudge against Tosan, it seems. Shisui muttered in between chewing dango they had for afternoon snacks in Naruto's place. Seriously, Tosan has already been dead for 10 years. Kagami Jisan was a direct subordinate of Nidime-sama, wasn't he? Itachi didn't really know Shisui's father, his father's older cousin who fell in the 3rd Shinobi War. War had not been kind for Kagami, who was a close comrade of the Nidime's students and Danzo. He was married pretty late even by shinobi standards to a medicnin 10 years younger when he was in his 40s. And when Kagami passed away, he was only 2 years old. Shisui had been loved dearly by his father, the youngest child he had when he was in his 50s. Shisui had been devastated when he lost both his father and brother to war. Shisui nodded. Danzo was his ex-teammate. Naruto frowned at that. From what Hakure told me, Danzo seems to loathe the Uchiha. He shook his head, not exactly loathing, but it's more like he's under the impression that your clan is going to be Konoha's downfall, a sick branch of Konoha's tree that he has to prune. Naruto didn't miss how Itachi and Shisui stiffened for a moment before they regained their composure. The Shunshin expert groaned at that old cripple seems to take Konoha's tree metaphor too literally. For one, Konoha is not a tree. Naruto agreed. Just because one branch grows the wrong direction or have sick leaves, doesn't mean you can just cut it off for the rest of the tree to be kept healthy. For one, the pruned part wasn't a human who could fight back and swear vengeance. He tilted his head to the side, but still, what kind of grudge does he have against your father, Shisui? The curly-haired Uchiha rubbed the back of his head. I was 4 when he passed away, but according to Kasan it has something to do with Tosan supporting Sandaime-sama instead of Danzo. Itachi frowned at that. It couldn't be that simple. Who knows? According to Hakure, Sandaime-sama was appointed as the next Hokage when he volunteered to be bait when Kumo ninjas cornered Nidaime-sama and their teams. Naruto drawled in solemn tone. Apparently Danzo was going to offer the same thing, but Sandaime-sama beat him to it. That was a gross summary of what happened according to Hakure, but Naruto hoped Danzo didn't really believe he would have been picked if he had offered to be the bait before the Sandaime did. Itachi and Shisui stared at him with unreadable expression while Naruto raised an eyebrow in silent query. How true is that information? It's a gross summary. I don't know how much Hakure glossed over, and I am not sure anyone involved in that event went into details about it, especially since the Nidaime passed away after that. Naruto pointed out in lofty tone. But still, there must be a connection: the Nidaime, the Sandaime, Danzo, the Uchiha clan. The Uchihas nodded thoughtfully at that. At a first glance the Nidaime seemed to despise the Uchiha, but if he kept Uchiha Kagami as one of his closest subordinates, that was not the case. Compared to his compassionate brother, the Nidaime was known to be a straight-laced realist, the very opposite of the Shodaime. But more than anything, he was known for being even-handed, a fair Hokage to his subjects, even to members of his clan. Hakure told him that once a Senju and an Uchiha fought and the Senju was killed. A further investigation pointed that the Uchiha was fighting in self-defense and the deceased Senju was the one in the wrong. The Nidaime didn't even bat an eye and refused the deceased Senju's family request to execute the Uchiha or punish more than what was stated in the law for a murder that was actually committed in self-defense. But what could drive such a great man to isolate the Uchiha? Well, not exactly isolating them, but he made sure that he had them under surveillance, treated so carefully as if he wanted to prevent something. That was their conclusion of Nidaime's political agenda, which was missing one vital piece of the puzzle. What ticked the Nidaime off to the point that he went to such lengths that even a soft-hearted Sandaime followed his example? It couldn't be a grudge from their family feud and not for Madara's betrayal because the clan itself had refused to follow him. It scared Naruto sometimes that the more he knew about Tobirama, the better he understood the pragmatic Kage. One part of his mind was wary that he would agree to Tobirama's reasons to put Uchiha clan in their current position. There must be something. Itachi murmured. That makes Senju Tobirama to be so wary of our clan. Aside from the fact that Madara and his brother had been on each other's throats since, forever. Shisui added in bored tone, he was fond of my father from what I heard. What makes my father different than the rest of our clan? Naruto narrowed his eyes. There are too many missing puzzle pieces. He concluded. Well, we'll find out soon enough. Hikiga no Kuni, Country of Murals. Year 1923 after Hokuto Sennin. The Senju clan moved to this land, a strategic position as it was close enough to Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron, and Itami no Mori, Forest of Pain. We're building this stronghold in preparation of war against Uchiha Ichizoku, which has allied themselves to the Hagoromo clan. Our allies. Naruto frowned. No, not this one either. He murmured dejectedly, though it didn't stop him from writing down what's written in his notebook. At the rate they were going, by the time this is over he would have completed a full record of the warring clans era. They couldn't afford more time for this. He had his duties to the tower and his friends had their duty to their clan. He couldn't have them escorting him for missions too often. The Uchiha clan's pride won't allow that. It helps that most missions are confidential as long as the participating team didn't spill, but there's no guarantee someone wouldn't poke their nose and spread rumors Uchiha prodigies were tasked for Jinchuriki babysitting now. But the Hokage wasn't going to trust him to a random shinobi team, especially since Danzo's agents could be anywhere. Itachi narrowed his eyes at the mural. We won't get much information from warring clans era it seems. Yeah, our ancestors are too busy butchering each other. Shisui quipped. The reason to do so wouldn't be far from continuing Hokuto Sennin's son's scuffle over his heir's status. The blonde Jinchuriki sighed wearily. This was the fourth historical site they visited this month alone in between missions. It ran them ragged at this rate, finishing C-rank missions as soon as possible so they could take a detour to historical sites such as Hikiga no Kuni. Itachi himself had explored most sites that were located around Konoha since he became genin, but so far he had only found details in the history of Konoha's birth. Strangely, the vital point in Konoha's history, Madara's betrayal wasn't mentioned anywhere beyond the fact that it was a disagreement with Hashirama that led to the battle in the Valley of the End. It seemed that whatever may have happened back then, no one wanted to remember it. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, craning his neck to the side. Oh well, it seems we either have to go to the more recent records or the oldest ones that record the era of Hokuto Sennin's sons. Do the records from that era even exist? Shisui asked skeptically, does the Kyuubi know? I doubt it. Naruto answered after a beat. According to Kurama, after his father's death, he and other Biju split up and avoided both Senju and Uchiha descendants, our ancestors. His eyes narrowed in sadness. To them, it's a disgrace that the sons fought and started a war that continued to their descendants for centuries, when their father wished for peace. Itachi clenched his fist. They're right on that. He couldn't help but sympathize with the Biju now. Their ancestors had ruined the peace Hokuto Sennin built. And Hashirama gave them out as peace offerings to stabilize the power balance for a temporary peace, one that had already been broken 3 times. Shisui nodded in agreement, and yet now, we stand here together. Uchiha, Uzumaki. Senju, why couldn't the sons of Hokuto Sennin do the same? Is the title of heir that important? That they destroyed everything their father had worked so hard for? He wondered out loud. If only they had. Itachi stepped forward, his hand hovered above the mural. There's no point in wishing for history that has been set on stone to change. Itachi murmured as he traced the carving of the mural. We still have a future ahead within our hands, ours to decide. Naruto reminded them, clenching his fist. Shisui grinned at that. You're right. He agreed, but still. He trailed off, eyeing the mural of long war between Senju and Uchiha. The present would have been much better if only war never existed. You're not the only one who thinks so, Shisui. Naruto murmured forlornly, I do too. So do I. Itachi added as the scene of Third War's End replayed on his mind, funeral after funeral, burying empty graves because there's no resource to retrieve the bodies, crying families over precious ones that would never return, more names carved in memorial stone. It was a scene of tragedy that was carved forever on his mind. There was a reason why he grew his own vegetables, fruits, and spices. It was so he didn't have to deal with shopkeepers who more often than not overcharge or sell goods that almost gone bad. And this year he doesn't even do his groceries himself, decreasing his already non-existent presents to the villagers to nil. So much that there's even rumors circulating that he had died in a ditch somewhere. Hokage-sama had even come and asked Hakure to keep him in the tower a few weeks ago, since apparently some idiots thought it was time to celebrate his supposed death. Hakure was furious, but Naruto ordered him to leave them be. He had better things to be worried about than idiotic villagers celebrating his death. The villagers were really pissed when they eventually saw him a few days later walking through the streets, breathing and alive. As usual, glares and whispers trailed after him. Some of them seemed ready to throw the nearest object they could grab at him. They were apparently furious that their wishes didn't come true. It was almost ironic that in reality they should thankful he was alive. If Konoha were to suddenly lose their Jinchuriki, it would the same as giving out an open invitation for invasion. Kyuzagakur, once a major power in the shinobi world, could attest to that. At some point they lost their Jinchuriki and were invaded by 4 hidden villages, reduced to the small village they were now, and lost Nanabi to Takigakur. Then again, shinobi business was not for civilians. He paused when he saw a black-haired boy around 5 years old staring at the rows of colorful plastic masks that were being displayed in front of a toy shop, more precisely the Umbu Hound mask. Looking at the old yellowing shirt he wore, Naruto guessed that it was either his family was so poor or this boy was an orphan. The boy definitely had no money to buy that toy mask. Speaking of toys, he barely remembered the last time he ever thought of wanting one. It felt like a long time ago. Now, with his shinobi status and mentality, he couldn't comprehend a child's need for toys. Or why it was fun to play with one. The boy looked really pitiful, and looking at what he wore, it was doubtful the boy had even enough money for food. He walked closer towards the child, standing beside the younger boy. The child turned to him, looking at his blue eyes curiously. You want that mask? Naruto asked, pointing at the plastic Umbu mask. The boy's eyes glowed with hope, and Naruto felt something warm spread on his chest. He nodded vigorously at the blonde. Naruto had just pulled his wallet out of his pocket when he had to raise his left arm to catch the mask the shop owner threw at him. "What are you doing, all of a sudden?" he asked incredulously. The shop owner then fumed, "Get out of here, bastard. I'll give that mask to you, so get lost." Naruto glanced at the young child beside him. The boy looked confused and frightened. The shop owner suddenly blew up like that. Then he sighed, his eyes glanced at the price tag on the shelves. Naruto placed a couple of notes on nearby table and dropped the mask to the boy's waiting hand. "Here." He glanced at the fuming shop owner, "Keep the change, sir." "Thank you." The boy breathed out and Naruto gave the boy a curt nod of acknowledgement. Then he walked away, and not even once did he look back. He heard the shop owner lecturing the boy to stay away from him, and that he was a bad influence on a child. The kid was obviously confused and asked why a bad person would pay for his toy mask. It was amusing to hear the shop owner sputter incoherently in his explanation and insist the demon brat was bad, and that's it. It was not the first time hostile adults had a difficulty explaining why children should stay away from him. Children were curious creatures by default, and whenever an adult forbids them from doing something, it was an automatic response to ask why not. Before, it was not hard to explain because he was a notorious prankster, but since he stopped his pranks because of his busy schedule, they couldn't use that excuse anymore. Naruto hoped they would stop trying to influence their children to hate him, or encouraging those kids to bully him. While he could defend himself easily, he was more worried of their children's behavior. Bully mentality was flourishing in younger generations because of their parents' ignorance, or rather encouragement. He was not concerned at all before, but it started to bother him since few weeks ago. Flashback. Naruto whipped his head to the side when he was walking through the park, carrying a bag of groceries on one hand after a shopping trip with Uchiha. The female seal master followed her young master's gaze, her eyes narrowed at the sight of three girls bullying another that was curled up to a ball on the ground. The bullied girl had pink hair like petal of cherry blossoms, an unusual color, Uchiha thought. Naruto clenched his fist. "Uchiha," he whispered. "Help that girl." The SCRF wearing kunoichi smiled then bowed, "Yes, Naruto-sama." Then she jumped away towards the scene. Naruto shook his head ruefully. He would never get used to treating his subordinates as subordinates. But arguing with them about it just makes them sad. Sakura was frightened. Why were these girls so mean to her? She just had a wide forehead, an unusual hair color, and reads a lot. Do those justify their actions to bully her? She never did anything wrong to them. Sakura was snapped out of her miserable thoughts when an older girl landed beside her gracefully. The teen didn't wear a forehead protector, but from her posture alone Sakura could tell she was a kunoichi. An instant Sakura forgot about her bullies, and stared at the cool kunoichi in awe. The kunoichi had a long sandy blonde hair that styled in ponytail, flowing down all the way to her waist. Beautiful face with exotic feature, and fair skin wrapped in sleeveless pink kimono that parted to expose chest and stomach that wrapped with thick white bandage, white shorts, and standard shinobi shoes. "Wow!" she mouthed in admiration. The bullies were also awed, but stiffened when they saw the pretty kunoichi was glaring at them. "What?" Ami, the bravest one of the bullies, asked. Uchiha crossed her arms. "Are you students of Ninja Academy?" she asked coolly, looking at the bully and then to Sakura. At their hesitant nod she glared harder at the bullies. "As future kunoichi, it's frowned upon to bully your future comrades," she stated solemnly. Ami cowered. "I am just Ami-chan." The afro-haired girl called out warningly. She was scared of the kunoichi. Bullying a helpless girl? Ganging up on her? Uchiha added ruefully, "Girls, keep this in mind. If you still want to be a kunoichi, learn to respect your peers and you will earn yours. What you did would just earn you a reputation as a bully. Hey! Leave my child alone!" A blue-haired woman yelled as she walked towards the group, fuming as she did so. Uchiha turned around to the direction of the angry voice, and she saw a mother that resembles the blue-haired girl called Ami. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I have no ill intention towards your daughter, but she was bullying this girl." She gestured towards Sakura, who at some point had cowered behind Uchiha's legs like a frightened rabbit. The mother paled when she saw Sakura had bruises, teary eyes, and dirty after her daughter pushed her to the ground. Ami-chan bullied her. Ami opened her mouth to protest but Yuzuriha cut her off. Yes ma'am, and as a kunoichi I deemed it prudent for me to warn your daughter as she is a student of academy. That's not how a kunoichi candidate should behave. But, well, it was obvious the mother was trying to pacify the kunoichi, thinking it was her who should chastise her daughter. This girl is also a student of academy, it worries me that she treated her fellow student that way. Yuzuriha stated coolly, the academy is not a civilian school ma'am, they teach children to be shinobi. Yuzuriha reminded the mother, it was not hard to guess she was a civilian judging from her chakra level. It was irritating, that nowadays some civilian families sign up their children to the academy without thinking about the consequences, and more often than not they were clueless of what they signed up their children for. I am afraid if I didn't give your daughter a warning now the consequences would be dire in the future. The mother looked dejected. A teenager like Yuzuriha chastised her daughter, but she knew better than talking back a kunoichi. I understand, but they're kids, and... She leaned in conspiratorially towards the frightened mother, and whispered to her ear. Believe me. I have seen my share of bullies who ended up killed in missions because they were hated by their comrades. Trust me ma'am, if your daughter manages to graduate from the academy I doubt she will survive her first real mission with that attitude. Yuzuriha leaned back to her full height, looking at the mother who just realized the horror of her ignorance. Ami-chan. She turned towards her daughter who flinched at her angry mother. Apologize to Sakura-chan. The kunoichi raised an eyebrow, so the mother knew the bullied girl then? Yuzuriha thought as the mother started to chastise her daughter about how her behavior had been wrong. Ami began to cry then much to their surprise as she yelled at her mother, but you let Nichan do it to that blonde kid in academy. Why can't I? Not fair. Ami was 7 when she saw her parents let her older brother to bully that boy everyone disliked, why she was chastised for doing the same to Sakura. Everyone disliked her for being a teacher's pet. The kunoichi gasped at that, it didn't take a genius to guess who the blonde kid Ami was talking about. I see. It seemed the tower didn't have to give enough retribution to these hateful parents who corrupted their children to ostracize Naruto-sama. They had paid the price. The mother looked at the kunoichi in panic, afraid that she would report it to Hokage. Present. Naruto sighed at the memory, if he didn't know better he would feel guilty. He wondered if he should bring this up to Hokage-sama, it seemed small at first but at this rate those hateful parents were going to drive their children to the wrong path. Then again he couldn't be the one who told Hokage, the old shinobi already took a lot of guilt tripping from Hakure recently. Hakure had taken pleasure in rubbing in how properly he was now treated in the tower to the Hokage, how he flourished as a talented seal master and so on. Hakure didn't have to be sneaky about it, he just have to praise Naruto like the proud grandfather he was and that was enough to drive the Sandaime to the wall. While Naruto was thinking about future generations' fate and how to bring it to Hokage's attention, a pink-haired girl walked past him, she was also recalling the same incident from last week, though with a very different perspective. After all, the girl was a normal 8-year-old girl. Yuzuriha shook her head, don't worry, let us part ways now, but don't forget my warning ma'am. You'll regret it if you do. It was a warning and not a threat, after all it was them who called it upon themselves. She didn't wait for an answer as she led the little girl she saved away from the bully and her mother, come on girl, let's sit near that fountain, I will fix you in a jiffy. Sakura obeyed and followed her heroine, The kunoichi then asked her to sit on a bench, cleaned the bruise, and then used cool green chakra to heal her bruised knee. Wow, so cool. The sandy blonde-haired seal master winked at the younger girl, you'll be able to do this too one day. Train your body hard, train your heart to its fullest, never give up and you'll see your path as a kunoichi. She bobbed her head enthusiastically, hi. Yuzuriha. A familiar voice called out for her. Sakura turned around, her eyes were wide when he saw a blonde boy dressed in traditional attire under the shadow of lush foliage. She couldn't see his face, but there was this regal air about him. He looked very young but from this distance she couldn't tell how old he was. It's time to go back to the tower. Yes, young master. Yuzuriha answered promptly. Sakura blinked when she saw a light blush on the kunoichi's cheek, so her name was Yuzuriha? Young master. So that blonde boy was a prince, Uchiha was working as his kunoichi. Her respect and admiration to Uchiha had gone up a notch, if not two. Uchiha was like kunoichi she read from book, pretty, cool, strong, charismatic and... Sakura looked at Uchiha's figure that wrapped in bandages. She had such a great figure too. Sakura was just 8, but she once asked her mother if the pink-haired little girl would look as pretty as her mother. Girls would start to grow their curve when they're preteens, and Sakura always dreamed to be a graceful and pretty kunoichi like Uchiha. Sakura-chan. Uchiha crouched down in front of her. I need to go now. She nodded at that. Bye-bye. Bye. She waved the retreating kunoichi back in a daze. Since then Sakura vowed she would be a cool kunoichi like Uchiha. Root HQ. Uzumaki Naruto, the child of 2S rank class shinobi and the sole heir of the Uzumaki clan. Not exactly sole, but from the intel he gathered it was very likely Uzumaki Naruto was the only one left of the main line of the Uzumaki. A child brimming with potential, and yet he was severely neglected. Danzo had seen how other villages trained their weapons to draw the full potential of their Jinchuriki, with Kumo as the most zealous one, with Iwa followed closely behind. He wouldn't worry of Iwa Jinchuriki, since according to what his spies in Iwa had gathered, their Jinchuriki would rather let Iwa hang themselves unless Oniki himself dragged them out under the threat of death. The Jinchuriki of Kumo in the other hand were fiercely loyal to their village, and had full control of their Biju. Konoha's Jinchuriki on the other hand was not even aware of his status, isolated, scorned and neglected. Soon as Jinchuriki might be an unstable child, but Sabaku no Gara at least knew what he was, and the Kaze Kage had a somewhat firm hold on his leash. Sarutobi in the other hand just threw that child to foolish villagers who had no idea who they had scorned and how much it could endanger Konoha. It was a sheer miracle that child hadn't ran away from Konoha or worse, became mentally unstable like the Ichiban no Jinchuriki. Danzo had thought Hiruzen had at last come to his senses and paid attention to their Jinchuriki's education. But instead of molding that child as Konoha's weapon, he put that child in the tower of all places and under the tutelage of a traitor. That place was pampering the Jinchuriki with adoration the young child craves, and in Danzo's book that was a foolish move. They couldn't have a pampered prince as Konoha's weapon, and one attached to a division that was formed from Uzu's refugees no less. If that's not enough, the Jinchuriki had formed bonds with Uchiha Itachi and his cousin Shisui. His spies had seen how attached the boy was to his Uchiha friends, to the point Hakure was willing to give Muramasa's Shizaiden to them. The heir of the Uchiha clan and Kagami's son, he didn't know where their loyalties lie, but there's nothing good being associated with a traitorous clan that could threaten their village. However, that was not an immediate concern for now, not as much as how Hiruzen and the tower pampered the Jinchuriki. Hiruzen had been very reluctant to give the promotion to the boy, and Uzumaki Naruto had become the youngest promoted Chunin since Hatake Kakashi. He had seen missions that Hiruzen had put aside for that child. All C-ranked and above missions with relatively low risk were given to the boy. If Uzumaki Naruto could survive Aizen, that child should be able to handle high-risk missions. That boy was a weapon, not a grandchild he should shelter and pamper. He had read reports of the physiological examination his men could scrap from what little they had seen from the boy when the Jinchuriki was out of the tower, which was off limits for his men thanks to the demmed wards they put up, to train with his Uchiha friends. The boy was extremely paranoid, almost borderline unhealthy, but at least he could approve of that. The training grounds the boy usually used was the closest to the tower and was heavily warded against intruders whenever he used it, one that even his best spies hadn't found a way to crack without alerting the boy. Personality-wise, from what he had heard, the boy who once was a troublemaker now had become a sweet child, or so Koharu claims. However, she also noted that the boy was calm, perceptive, and very polite. The boy was humble when convincing Hiruzen and his teammates to promote him, but he didn't sell himself short either. What he was good and bad at were delivered professionally to them, and not even Hiruzen could deny that the boy deserved that promotion. The Uzumaki's seal work was top-notch, like any Uzumaki should. From their observation of the way the boy walked and moved, he must be quite proficient in taijutsu. The boy was a chakra powerhouse, so he had potential as a ninjutsu specialist, while not so much for genjutsu probably. But in overall, if the boy could achieve that much at 8 and without a mentor in the ninja arts other than Fuinjutsu, if Hiruzen listened to him at least once about training the boy to his fullest potential. What a waste. It seems once again as the root that supports Konoha from underground, he had to make his move. It was all for Konoha. Koishi no Kuni, country of pebbles. The Uchiha built quite a number of strongholds during the warring clans era like Senju did. The fortress they visited in this country was one of those. They had found a journal left by Uchiha Tajima, supposedly the father of Madara and the clan head before him. For a short moment they thought they had hit the jackpot, only to be disappointed that all Tajima wrote in his journal was about the war with the Senju and how much he hated the self-righteous clan. Naruto had to say this man was undoubtedly Madara's father, judging from how anything Senju related in his journals painted the clan in the worst light possible. Sometimes Naruto wondered if the Uchiha clan could even remember that they were related to their archenemy. Shisui was pretty depressed that they didn't come any closer to the answers they seek, just the revelation that he had another crackpot ancestor other than Madara. Naruto and Itachi told him to shut up. They knew this was another dead end and didn't need Shisui to point out that was another relative to be listed as driven mad by the rivalry with the Senju, which was made up by the majority of Uchiha elders. However, we found out that Madara befriended the Shodime when he was around Itachi's age. Naruto murmured when he read one entry that for once was about his son Madara rather than cursing Senjubutsuma to hell and back. He found out and followed Madara with Izuna to the meeting place. Shisui nodded at that. Madara was surprisingly late in awakening his Sharingan, or at least by clan standards awakening it at 12 is average. He noted thoughtfully, something to do with the mercenary lifestyle of that era probably. The Shunshin expert wondered out loud. HN. Itachi grunted, but it's strange, why Uchiha Tajima noted the awakening of Madara's Sharingan as something worthwhile from that clash between his sons with Senjubutsumas. Naruto blinked olishly at that. Probably because the fight pushed Madara to his limits that caused him to awaken his Sharingan. The Uchiha's scion shook his head. That couldn't be the case, if you look at previous entries. Itachi carefully flipped the old journal to his desired page. Uchiha Tajima explained each battle he had with Senjubutsuma in great detail, but in this entry. Itachi opened the previous entry they read. He and his rival, their sons, their fight was very brief, they barely exchanged blows. Is it possible to awaken our Sharingan without being under a stressful condition like in battle? Shisui wondered out loud. I remember awakening mine when I was 11, a bandit almost got a lucky strike on me and my teammate with his giant axe. Naruto turned to Itachi curiously, how about you Itachi? Itachi looked hesitant for a moment before he confessed, I was 7, a few months after I graduated I took my brother for a walk in a park. A ninken infected by rabies suddenly appeared out of nowhere and tried to attack me and my brother. Itachi shifted slightly, and I activated my Sharingan for the first time. Naruto shot the Uchiha an apologetic look for reminding him of a particularly unpleasant memory. He sighed wearily, so both of you were in dangerous situations when you activated it, same case for the rest of your clan. Shisui nodded at that, yeah. Some crazy parents even tried to scare their kids during the war period in hopes that they get their Sharingan to work early. Itachi frowned at that. My father stopped them after one of the parents almost endangered their son's life, I recall. His father was really furious that time. While Fugaku valued power, as a father he couldn't pardon someone who almost drowned their 6-year-old boy for it. The curly-haired Uchiha nodded at that, yeah. The Jinchuriki frowned. War or not they shouldn't be that desperate. Does it work though? He asked curiously. Shisui snorted, that was the unfunny part of the folly, it didn't work at all, the kids were scared shirtless by their parents and needs therapy, but no fancy eyes of ours. How come though? Naruto wondered out loud, from Madara's case and yours I was under the impression that as long as you're under stress it doesn't really matter what causes it. He informed them. It seems that it's not how it works. Itachi narrowed his eyes at that. So there must have been a wrong preconception in how we awaken our Jujutsu. Naruto nodded thoughtfully at that, not exactly wrong if majority of your clan believes and affirms that's how they got it. He pointed out thoughtfully. Maybe there's something more to it. Shisui crossed his arms. By the way, how about Byakugan then? There are rumors that the Sharingan is derived from the Hyuga's Byakugan, though our clan vehemently denies it. The Jinchuriki laughed softly at that. As if. I have asked Hakure, he said someone spread that rumor long time ago to spark a conflict between the Hyuga and Uchiha, but Nadime-sama stepped in before it got anywhere. He informed them in solemn tone. Besides, the Sharingan is too diverse in its abilities to be derived from the Byakugan. Naruto pointed out, the Byakugan focuses in enhancing eyesight such as telescoping, wide field of vision and see-through abilities. He listed on, it makes more sense to think it came from the same ancestor rather than a mutation of another. But if that's the case, the Hyuga would have been with the Uchiha, fighting against the Senju clan. Itachi pointed out. As of now we're not even in the best terms with the Hyuga. Naruto nodded at that. In that case they might not be related at all. Besides, Byakugan is a jujutsu that they have since they were born, unlike the Sharingan, which needs to awaken. He licked his lips. I have asked Kurama about the Rinnegan, and he didn't know much about it either, but probably both Sharingan and Byakugan are derived from it. In looks alone though, the Uchihas look closely related to the Senju. Shisui noted loftily. The Jinchuriki frowned at that, as in bone structure, eye colors which are dominantly black, gray, or brown, dominantly dark hair with a gray sheen like mine or blue like my brother's, sometimes light brown or white. Itachi listed on in solemn tone. The Hyuga have dominantly straight solid black hair or dark brown, and their eyes are white and not as narrow as ours. He blinked owlishly. I see, well, we're all descended from one man. He trailed off. By the way, why does the Senju not have a distinct bloodline? Itachi shrugged. They were born with the body of the sage, inheriting their forefathers' strength of will and physical energy. He quoted from history records that describe the descendants of the Rakuto Sennin's second son. Does that count as a bloodline? In that case no wonder there's a misconception that the Uzumaki is an offshoot of theirs and not the other way around. Naruto muttered thoughtfully. But still, isn't it pretty weird that the Shodaime is the only one with the Mokuton and healing properties? Those are very much like a bloodline, but he was the only Senju who had it. Shisui shrugged. Mutation. He guessed. If that's the case, shouldn't at least one his descendants be recorded to have it? At least the watered-down version. Naruto pointed out, rolling his eyes. Maybe all Senju have the potential but no clue how to activate it. Itachi narrowed his eyes. True, but they've been shinobi as long as our clan. It doesn't make sense that only one of them managed to awaken it. Well, there's nothing we can do about it since Tsunade-sama is the only one left and she is traveling as the legendary sucker all over the world gambling like mad. Shisui pointed out. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he closed Uchiha Tajima's journal. It's been bothering me for a while, but can you tell me? Tell you what? Shisui asked curiously. Why there's no Senju clan left in Konoha. Or at least have the surname aside from Tsunade Hime. He wondered out loud. Shouldn't they be comparable in size with the Uchiha when Shodaime founded Konoha? Silence hung heavily in the air as the Uchihas processed what Naruto told them. Shisui grimaced as he found his voice. True, what the hell happened to them? I mean, when I entered academy at 6, no one in my class is a Senju. Itachi nodded at that. None in mine either, even though I attended for less than 2 years. There are some civilians in our clan, maybe that's the case with Senju. Shisui guessed. His cousin frowned at that, and none of them are involved in being shinobi anymore? In the very shinobi village they founded no less. Shisui grimaced. True, that doesn't make sense. Naruto groaned. Damn, more mysteries instead of answers. I should have asked Hakure. Speaking of which, this is the 10th historical site for the last 3 months. Shisui pointed out with a sigh. So far we're getting nowhere aside from Naruto probably almost completing a history book of warring clans era. The Jinchuriki flushed a deep red. Give it a rest. At any rate we can't give up now. Should we recheck murals around Konoha? Itachi suggested. I might have missed something when I checked it. I was 8 after all. Shisui snorted at that. Won't it be funny if the records we have been trying so hard to find was in Konoha all along? Or better yet in the Uchiha compound no less. Somewhere as cliché as under the tatami mats of the Naka shrine perhaps. He laughed out loud, holding his aching side. Shisui. Naruto and Itachi face-palmed at his antics. If only they knew what lies in the main hall of the Naka shrine, beneath the 7th tatami mat from the far right. They probably would be really pissed. Up on a cliff, two shinobi donning Konoha's Umbu masks observed the three Chunin that emerged from the exit of an abandoned Uchiha stronghold. They saw the curly-haired Uchiha known as Shunshin no Shisui comment about Naruto's paranoia of setting up privacy seals and warding seals even though they were in the middle of nowhere, and no one would be interested in their conversation. The Jinchuriki argued that shinobi couldn't be too careful, so please shut up and don't bring it up now. While their research was harmless, who knows if someone would get a wrong idea if they heard it. The Uchiha Prodigy they were informed as the son of Uchiha Fugaku agreed with the Jinchuriki, and suggested to make a stop in a tea house 10 miles from their current location. Shunshin no Shisui shook his head as he told his cousin that was a geezer's hobby. The Jinchuriki sighed and agreed they could go there as the Uchiha's heir wished, and if he heard one more comment about old men he would throttle the Shunshin expert. The pale dark-haired boy under the mask frowned at the display. The three of them were hailed as prodigies, and yet they bantered like kids their age. He heard his surrogate brother let out a soft chuckle, probably amused by their antics. He shot his brother a glare to keep quiet or they would be discovered. Somehow it got through in spite of the mask and the white-haired boy just gave him a thumbs up. Naruto, who was walking between Itachi and Shisui, frowned a little. They were being followed and by someone good no less. He wouldn't have noticed them if not for the cage bunshin he scattered all over the perimeter that hung as bugs and other inconspicuous animals in the forest. His expression was carefully blank but inside he was cursing their bad luck. He tried his best to not show that he noticed, forcing his body to relax and walking as if nothing was amiss. He was sure Shisui and Itachi noticed too, as they kept the bantering going. To outsiders it was normal, but to them it was unusual to be so chatty in the middle of the road. He opened his map, pretending to note the location of Itachi's favorite tea house, which was in the same direction to Konoha. What he was really trying to do was actually to look for strategic locations where they were likely to be ambushed by these stalkers. He felt like he wanted to cry when he saw there was a canyon ahead, one with a very narrow path no less. It was very likely they were outnumbered too. Direct confrontation was definitely out of question. Naruto took a deep breath. The dango in that place is pretty famous, isn't it? Naruto asked as he quickly folded the map, rubbing his eyes as a cue to Itachi and Shisui to activate their Sharingan. Yes, the green tea-flavored one is especially good. Shisui chimed in, his Sharingan blazing briefly as he and Itachi caught Naruto absent-mindedly waving his forefinger, writing character for run and outnumbered. Itachi nodded, I prefer the sesame one though. It took them around 10 minutes to reach the narrow path. On the left side was river with fast current and since it had been raining lately it was on the verge of flooding while on the right was a cliff. Naruto and his team were still chatting. Naruto was laughing at a joke Shisui made while Itachi looked as stoic as ever. Their observers were in higher ground, watching them silently with cold eyes underneath their umbu's masks. One of the masked shinobi made a sequence of hand seals, rabbit, boar rat horse tiger snake and whispered, Doton, Dori Ukatsu earth release, earth flow divide. They barely jumped away in time when the ground underneath them was split in two. Naruto growled as he threw seal-enhanced shuriken to the first masked shinobi he saw. Futon no Jojikafun, wind element cross seal. Shisui and Itachi threw their shuriken, which were just 1 second behind Naruto's, Katon no Jojikafun, fire element cross seal. Nenshou Arashi no Jutsu, burning storm technique. Wind and fire element collided and formed a tornado of fire that consumed everything on its path. The three shinobi landed gracefully on the ground, watching the fire dissipate, leaving dark scorching marks on the ground. Did we get them? Shisui asked. Well. Naruto trailed off before his eyes narrowed instinctively and he brought his elbow up sharply without warning, blocking the incoming punch from a masked shinobi on his left. Who the hell are you? He hissed threateningly. The Jinchuriki was sure that if not for the mask he would have seen a sneer underneath. How naive. The masked shinobi murmured. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw a glint of steel from his right and his kunai clashed with the tanto of his second opponent. On the corner of his eyes Naruto saw both Itachi and Shisui were engaged by two masked shinobi. All of them were wearing the same Konoha Umbu mask. Naruto's eyes narrowed dangerously at the tipless tanto he blocked with his kunai and then at the short, black, midriff jacket, with red straps over the shoulders that he saw underneath the black cloak they wore. They were locked, surrounded, and outnumbered. What a shitty situation, Naruto concluded. The Jinchuriki smirked at his opponents, naive. He laughed softly, not us, you are. He shouted as his body slowly disintegrated. Bunshin Daibakuha no Jutsu. The Umbu gasped. Sayonara. The clone grinned cheerfully. Boom. 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 3 miles from the explosion, on the other side of the canyon, the real Naruto cursed loudly. He fell few steps behind Itachi and Shisui, but neither of them stopped to question Naruto what bothered him. If anything, that was a cue for them to move faster. Shit. Of all things that could attack us here. He recalled the memory he got from cage bunshins he used to throw their pursuers off of their track. Itachi narrowed his eyes at Naruto. I assume you know the identity of our pursuers. Naruto nodded, gritting his teeth in annoyance. Hakure showed me their uniform and weapons before, it can't be anyone else but Root members. Itachi and Shisui winced at the information. I recognize that tipless Tonto of theirs, and I doubt anyone would impersonate an officially disbanded branch of Konoha's Umbu. What would they want from us? Shisui wondered out loud, swinging from one branch to another branch. Naruto scowled as he jerked his thumb to his chest, Jinchuriki. Then he pointed at Itachi and Shisui. Uchihas with matured Sharingan. He groaned, is there a need to ask? Is Danzo out of his mind? Shisui shouted in horror, we're not nobody orphans no one would miss. The clan and the tower would demand his head on a silver platter if he dares to touch us. Who knows? He dispatched 2 squads back there and I doubt my Bunshin Daibakuha got them all. We're not out of danger yet. Itachi scowled, his Sharingan blazing with fury. We're not alone anymore. Shisui nodded, making a ram seal as he scanned their surrounding. Oh. I think you didn't get anyone out of the game, the 2-3 men cells are alive, kicking, and gaining on us. On the front there's 2 teams too. The Jinchuriki growled, like hell I'll let them to surround us from both sides. Naruto took a slip of paper with a seal array written on it, charging it with chakra as much as he could then threw it to the ground 10 feet away from him. Gomjimen Fyun, sticky ground seal, activate. The seal array glowed when it touched the ground then burned out by Naruto's immense chakra. Itachi narrowed his eyes at the ground that affected by the seal. He could see it with his jujitsu and noted the range was at least 60 feet in diameter and the ground was brimming with chakra. Had it been someone else who pumped that much chakra, they would have collapsed because of chakra exhaustion. How much chakra did you use on that seal, Naruto-kun? Naruto snorted, enough to make anyone who steps on it unable to move from the waist down. Further improvement in that seal affected chakra that was used by shinobi to stick not just in their soles but also their waists with more chakra. Tree climbing needed focusing chakra on their feet, but they also need to use circulated chakra evenly on other body parts to stand upright so they could walk normally. This was the reason why beginners were told to run instead of walking to reduce risk of back injury. Unless they have small chakra pools or figured out how to cut off chakra from their feet, they would be stuck for at least 10 minutes. Nasty. Shisui commented gleefully. Now, how should we engage the ones in front of us? We will reach them in 5 minutes. Itachi narrowed his eyes, no matter how we see it, we're outnumbered, and they knew us while we don't know them at all. Naruto nodded in agreement, true, this is a battle we should escape from, there's no point fighting them. However it seems they're not going to let us go that easily. Itachi murmured. Shisui narrowed his eyes, oh my, one of them is pretty good with suppressing chakra, I didn't notice him until we got this close. Itachi and Naruto frowned at that, he was going to attack us from above, this guy has means to fly it seems. Aerial attack. Naruto groaned, great, it's getting harder to escape. They're coming. Shisui warned them. High above a monochrome-colored bird hovered above the 3 shinobi, the rider of the bird unrolled his scroll and drew 5 small birds. Ninpo, Chojuyojiga. The birds were animated out of the paper and flew straight to their targets below. Naruto gritted his teeth as he spun around, as expected the guy who was up there would attack first. Haikao no Fyun, seal of flight, activate. The seal on Naruto's leg glowed briefly as he jumped. The Root member didn't expect Naruto to suddenly jump the moment his birds flew out of his scroll, Not to mention the jump reached him who was flying at least 40 feet in the air. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he threw a kunai with an explosive tag attached to it. The Umbu's eyes widened as he quickly jumped away from his ride and drew another one as he fell, wincing slightly as he landed on another bird while the previous one was blown up by an explosive tag. Naruto knew that unlike the ink bird rider he was not really flying and he couldn't keep his seal activated unless he wanted to be blown away by wind, especially in this place where the wind was pretty strong and the fact that it's going to rain soon. As he slowly descended back to the ground, Naruto grinned at the ink technique user. "If I can't fight in the sky, so will you." Naruto shouted as a chain sprung from his back and grabbed the bird by its neck, dragging it to the ground so fast that the ink user had no time to draw another bird to escape. Sai. A gray-haired root caught the boy before he could crash, while his bird splattered as an ink blot on the ground. Naruto blinked at the two in confusion. That was unexpected. He thought they were conditioned to be emotionless, but this guy who saved Sai was definitely worried for the boy. Perhaps they had not gone through the worst, that they're still in a stage of growing up as brothers, but in that case, why were they sent out for this mission then? He was snapped out of his musings as he blocked a Tonto from cutting down his arm with his kunai. "Che, I can't believe your master wasted this much of manpower for us," he gritted out. Itachi and Shisui were still engaged in their fight, handling 2 to 3 opponents at once. Naruto himself was handling 3, that Sai boy, Sai's brother, and another root member in goat mask. Using his cage bunshin he could avoid being outnumbered by his opponents, but it didn't matter much if it only takes one hit to dispel them. There was also one more concern of his: if possible he didn't want to permanently harm that Sai boy or his brother. If he was right, that boy's ability is actually, he shook his head, they had to find a chance to get away soon before their opponent exhausts them. Unlike him, Itachi and Shisui had a weak stamina. At least weaker compared to his, which comes from his status as a Jinchuriki and Uzumaki. 10 clones of Naruto threw another barrage of Ninshou Shuriken powered by a wind elemental seal. Sai and his brother got away with riding another ink bird, but the last member didn't ask for assistance from Sai and went for a defensive earth element technique, Doton, Doryu Haki. A massive wall made or earth erupted, colliding with the barrage of wind elemental shuriken. It cut through the wall swiftly, but missed the target. Naruto frowned and ordered his clones to repeat their attack, and the goat-masked Umbu was quickly exhausted by his series of earth barrier techniques. The earth user was on the verge of exhaustion and he only had enough for one technique left. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw the goat-masked Umbu made a series of hand seals for an offensive earth technique. "Are you mad? We're on top of a cliff. And they're very close to the edge to boot. After using so much Doton, the ground must be really loose by now. If he used an offensive Doton, the ground around them would collapse." "Doton, Dokubaku, landslide," the root member whispered, and the ground beneath them collapsed together with him, who exhausted all his chakra for the technique. Itachi and Shisui, who were slightly farther, right outside of the technique's range, cursed. That bastard was going to drag Naruto with him. He was their target since the beginning. "You bastard!" Shisui cursed. Itachi didn't need to be told as he pulled a long ninja wire with a kunai tied on the end, then he threw it in Naruto's direction. Naruto was about to grab the kunai handle, but the wire was swiftly cut by a small bird made of ink. Itachi's eyes widened. Naruto-kun. His clones dispelled one by one. Naruto had no choice but to jump using his Haikau no Fyun. There was a risk of getting blown away, but he could worry about that later. He jumped high in the air and barely missed the root brothers who flew on his left. "Eh? What are you?" Naruto didn't have time to defend himself when Sai suddenly splashed him with ink. "What the?" Naruto yelped when the ink suddenly came alive and tried to strangle him with their snake-like body. "Ninpo, Sumi Nagashi, ink splash," Sai whispered. Naruto found himself suspended in the midair, bound by Sai's snake ink that connected to his inkwell. "Let me go, you." The boy beside Sai grinned under his mask. "Don't trash around so much, Sai's Sumi Nagashi is not going to break with brute strength." Naruto scowled at that as he tried to rip off the ink snake that restrained his leg. Surprisingly, it could stretch like rubber, and when he snapped the ink snake they easily reformed around the him, making struggling pointless. "Ugh." Itachi and Shisui gritted their teeth as they watched Naruto being carried away by them. Shisui formed a dragon seal. "Shisui." If you attack them you'll harm Naruto too. Itachi warned. Shisui scowled, shit. The Root members they fought had fled, Danzo didn't want anything to do with them it seemed. Shin looked down at the blonde boy struggled and had to say he was impressed a boy that was even younger than Sai could rip it off in the first place. He had seen adult shinobi didn't even able to pull it off. Wow. As expected of an Uzumaki, they have brute strength. Sai commented in solemn tone. Naruto glared at the two brothers, you're going to carry me like this to your leader? Dangling 30 feet in the air like a fish caught in net? Sai nodded, we were told you're some sort of prince in the tower, my apologies if the ride is uncomfortable. He said in sardonic tone. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, he noted Itachi and Shisui were following them closely on the ground and they were moving deeper to the canyon. Root had a hideout somewhere around here perhaps? What do you want from me anyway? Naruto wondered out loud, crossing his arms as if it was a sign he gave up struggling. Sorry I can't tell you. It seemed the older brother was chattier than the younger, Naruto noted. They weren't as bad as Hakure said, even though he couldn't see their faces Naruto could see they still have feelings unlike the full-pledged members of Root. They probably had no idea what Danzo had in store for them in a few years, or maybe even months. But like any member of Root, they were obedient to Danzo. Just stay still Uzumaki. The younger boy intoned. And Nisan, stop talking with our target. Sorry. Shin muttered in sheepish tone. Naruto sighed, it seemed he wouldn't get anything out of them for sure. You know what? Your apology for this uncomfortable ride is accepted. Naruto said in genial tone. But. The brothers blinked at that, confused at how their prisoner acted. What? Naruto smiled at them, one that caught them off guard. Why don't you have a taste of your own medicine? Naruto asked with a smile. See Yaku no Kyuzeri. Chains of pledge. Chains sprouted from Naruto's back and shot towards Shin and Sai. Sai and his brother couldn't move as the chain wrapped around their legs, torso and neck and the bird they rode stopped mid-flight. Ugh. The Jinchuriki sighed, now you know how unpleasant my position is, now. Let me go. He ordered coldly as the chain tightened its hold on Sai, and the accuser winced. He was not going to hurt them, just scare them a little, and force Sai to take them back to the ground. Other Root members probably were waiting for them, they probably thought their precious cargo would have been transported safely. Not his original plan but it would do. No. Sai muttered stubbornly. That was not a request. Naruto hissed threateningly as the tip of his chain traveled up and tapped their masks. Let me go or else. Unlike his mother's chain, the tip of his chain was not shaped like blade of kunai but tomo like Uchiha's Sharingan. He at first wondered why it shaped that way, but that probably the only thing that differed his chain from his mother's. It was sharp enough to pierce human's flesh however. This time Sai didn't bother to dignify him with an answer. Naruto narrowed his eyes, it seemed they didn't believe he would carry out his threat. Did he really have to injure them? Shin gasped when the tomo-shaped blade pierced and shattered their masks. He could be careless of his but he saw that sharp blade of chakra was just a hair-breadth from Sai's forehead, and there was a thin trail of blood on Sai's face. Shin glared at Naruto murderously, you. I am serious. Naruto gritted out, unlike your brother who could only restrain me with his technique, my chains on the other hand could really kill you. He muttered to the gray-haired boy. And I am pretty sure your master wants me alive, so you can't kill me. His breath hitched when he saw the tomo blades were on their neck, but it was Sai who he was worried about. Let my brother go. He snapped. If he lets me go first. Naruto snapped back. He had no intention to harm them, but he couldn't let himself be captured by Danzo. Itachi and Shisui watched the three arguing shinobi in horror. At some point Sai's ink bird had descended to a much lower altitude. In fact Naruto and his capturers were below them now, and under them was a ravine. They didn't worry much about falling, that Root boy could fly with his ink animals and Naruto had his chains. What should we do? Shisui asked worriedly. Itachi narrowed his eyes then pointed at another chain of Naruto that sneakily reached out to their direction. We're going to. His eyes widened when he spotted a Root member watching the same scene from the cliff across theirs. Futon. Itachi hissed, "Katon. Gukakyu no Jutsu." At that moment Itachi desperately wished he had been a wind-natured shinobi instead of fire, because even though his fireball hit the wind user Umbu who had no means to defend from the fire elemental attack, the wind elemental attack was faster than his and unleashed upon the three defenseless shinobi. Naruto's eyes widened when his attention was drawn by what happened above them. Itachi unleashed a fireball at someone who unleashed a futon, Daitapa, great breakthrough, at their direction. At this distance they were going to be blown away to who knows where. Naruto-kun! Itachi yelled as he and Shisui walked down the cliff to help their friend. Yaa! But Naruto was already hit by the wind elemental attack with full force, along with Sai and Shin whose ride dispersed in ink by the attack. The gust was so strong that Itachi and Shisui was almost blown away if not for their quick wit to hide behind a large rock to protect themselves from the gust. The moment the attack subsided they found no trace of Naruto or the Root brothers. Itachi and Shisui looked around in faint hope that Naruto managed to use his chains to save himself, but it seemed that Naruto was totally caught off guard by that wind elemental attack. Itachi clenched his fist, his blunt nail dug to his palm to the point it drew blood. "Let's go find Naruto," he drawled to Shisui who looked equally furious. "I doubt they want him dead, they were this careless probably because they want to bet on his Jinchuriki's regenerative ability." Shisui gritted his teeth, "So what if he is a Jinchuriki? They think he didn't feel pain if he is hurt? And what of the two kids they blew away with him?" Itachi narrowed his eyes, Sharingan came to life as its tomos spun. "I doubt they cared." Itachi hissed in anger, "And after I am done with them, emotionless or not I will make them regret this. No one should dare touch his friend, his brother. No one." Had Itachi seen his reflection on the water puddle nearby he would have noticed that his eyes had gained their third tomos. But at this point he didn't care, his friend was in danger. Chapter 11. 11th Legacy, Resolve of Steel. Koishi no Kuni, Country of Pebbles. Shisui was furious that Root had them, but he and Itachi would get their revenge soon or they're not Uchiha. The Root members who were unlucky enough to get trapped by Naruto's sticky ground seal were on their mercy now. "Where have you guys taken him?" Shisui hissed as he readied another senbon laced with lightning chakra to be put in another non-vital but no less painful spot in the Root member's body. Their hostages were incapacitated with binding seals and strong genjutsu. Itachi and Shisui didn't want to take chances. It was their luck that the Root teams were stuck on the ground when they found them. If any of them broke free they would be outnumbered again. However, that was as far as their luck went, since none of the Root members answered. They were all as stiff and silent as a doll, and seemed incapable of betraying their master. Itachi frowned at their lack of response, then forced one of them to open their jaws. As expected, there was a seal on their tongues that resembled Chinese binary codes. This must be the Iwahazuru no Fuin Danzo stole from the tower. Itachi and Shisui contemplated on stepping up their interrogation to get around the seal, but unfortunately they didn't have time to waste on torturing Danzo's puppets. Considering what kind of life they've had so far, Itachi and Shisui thought a quick and painless death was an act of mercy on the Root members. Hopefully in the next reincarnation they would have a better life. The Uchiha cousins then went in search of their friend, and not even once did they look back at the 6 burning corpses they left behind. Those who descended from the Uzumaki clan were blessed with special chakra. Their branch family could use their chakra for various purposes, such as healing, but it pales in comparison to the main family. The main family's special chakra was more potent than normal chakra, which was why in spite of it not being elemental in nature, it could materialize and move at the user's will without a medium. However, this special chakra of theirs had its drawbacks. It was so potent that it burned out their chakra coils, making it extremely painful to use for those with undeveloped chakra coils. Which was why even though Uzumaki children of the main family awakened it at 8, they never used it more than for ritual purposes during their coming of age ceremony, which required a very little amount to show what kind of shape their chakra took. Most of them didn't even use their special chakra for battle until their coils are fully developed. Usually starting at 12, an Uzumaki would be able to use their special chakra sparingly. Hakure had warned him to not use more than 3 chains at once, since while Kurama's healing could prevent the worst of the damage does not mean he should abuse it when he could avoid it. Naruto was sure Hakure would be really angry if he knew what just happened. Not only did he go against Hakure's warning, he had done so to save 2 root kids. He was dangling in the air, right in the middle of the ravine with 4 chains deeply rooted to the cliff face while the other 2 chains coiled around Sai and his brother. There are only 2 words to describe his position: oh shit. When he saw that Sai was waking up he couldn't help but ask, "Hello Sai, how about a temporary truce?" He offered as the boy blinked owlishly at their situation. "As you can see, one of your teammates fucked up and blew us away, so here we are, dangling like idiots. Can you draw something to get us out of here? We can settle our mess later the moment our feet touches the ground." Sai narrowed his eyes at Naruto. "Why should I help you? Wouldn't it be more beneficial for me to capture you here?" Naruto snorted. "What makes you think you have the upper hand now, Sai?" He wondered out loud. "Just for your information, my chains are still coiling around your waist and I can kill you if I want." Sai frowned at that. "And I can get myself out of this mess, but the only reason I didn't is because I only have enough strength to pull myself up and I would have had to let you and your brother go." The painter shinobi narrowed his eyes as he fished out a scroll out of his pocket and started to draw a hawk. Shin, who has just barely regained consciousness, yelped when Sai suddenly grabbed his arm. Naruto released them from his hold and withdrew all of his chains except one to pull himself up. It didn't surprise him at all that the moment he poked his head out of the ravine he had to duck from a barrage of shuriken. Activating his Haikau no Fuin, Naruto jumped 20 feet above the ground, somersaulted and landed lightly on his feet. His eyes narrowed at the 3 squads of Root, and unlike those who attacked before, they were as young as Sai. There are no adult in this group. The oldest was probably just 13 to 15. Something was wrong. Danzo had used children before, but it didn't make sense to send them to go after him. Even if they were weaker than the adults, it doesn't make it any easier for them just because he was alone. Naruto activated his Haikau no Fuin again and fled to the deep forest, or rather to the sky above the canopy. He would have used Kagebunshin, but he needed Shisui, who was a sensor, to track him down with his chakra to find him. This was a battle to survive. Whatever Danzo wanted from him, that cripple old crone wouldn't get it. Shit. Naruto cursed when he saw a barrage of kunai with exploding tags headed for his direction. He used Kawarami to replace himself with a log, barely escaping with his life. "It seems that they're after my life." Naruto concluded from how lethal their attacks had been so far, but why would they want him dead? His death would be Konoha's downfall, or at least a trigger to it, like what happened to Kusagakur. Then again, thinking of the political agenda of that old cripple could wait until he got out of this mess. He gritted his teeth when his kunai clashed with a Tonto. While he knew he had superior strength, even he could be pushed back like now when another ninja joined in. Naruto glared at the 2 as he was stuck blocking their swords with the kunai on both his hands. He could feel his left hand start to waver. He really had to get his left hand to be on equal strength with his right, he thought grimly before he activated flight mode and slipped away from their grasp like water. Naruto formed 3 seals in rapid movement: Tiger Snake Ram, Futon, Kami Oroshi, Wind Release, Divine Wind Current. Naruto whispered as a vortex of wind was created from his palm, blasting everything on its path including the 2 young Root. While he only had completed second stage of wind manipulation, contrary to what people believe, you didn't have to complete elemental chakra, the training to use elemental techniques. Doing so just helps you if you plan on creating original techniques and increases the chakra efficiency of jutsu. Or in the case of the wind element, it allows shaping the wind chakra to its most lethal shape. Naruto has not perfected that stage yet, but fortunately for him, he had enough chakra to make it up with sheer chakra overload. Naruto swallowed when he saw them slam against nearby trees, crashing down to the ground in a painful heap. Naruto was sure he at least broke a couple of important bones of theirs, judging from the sickening cracks he heard. He would have finished them off to relieve them of their suffering, but unfortunately he could not afford that charity in an active battlefield, not when there were 9 other Root members after his life. As he kept dodging their assault and returned it in kind, he noticed something was wrong. They stopped trying to use lethal attacks and were actually trying to herd him to one particular direction. Naruto really didn't want to be herded like a sheep, but the moment he noticed it, he felt a ripple of chakra caressing his skin and cursed out loud. A barrier. They set up a fucking damned barrier. One that was no doubt strong enough to jam chakra signals, even a Jinchuriki's chakra. Naruto spun around, ready to run out to the barrier's boundary. He had to destroy the barrier, continuing the fight inside would put him in a disadvantage. His eyes widened when he saw another barrage of kunai was thrown in his direction, and they had exploding tags on it. He activated his Haikau no Fun in reflex because with his normal speed alone he won't get away in time. However, in a moment of panic Naruto misjudged the power he put on his seal and the blast the exploding tags released. He was blown away high to the air before crashing through a row of trees. Shisui, who had been running alongside him, suddenly came to an abrupt halt and Itachi stopped a few feet ahead of him. After cremating the Root members, Shisui decided to track down Naruto's chakra, which supposed to be pretty easy considering that Naruto didn't try to hide it. He was like a chakra beacon to a sensor shinobi like Shisui. They had been running like mad when Shisui sensed from Naruto's chakra spike that he had been attacked. "I lost him," Shisui whispered, Itachi blanching as the worst scenario played on his mind. "No, he is not dead," he assured Itachi. "Something is interrupting his chakra from sending out signals for me to track." "A barrier?" Itachi guessed. Shisui nodded, "Most likely, one that is strong enough to mask Naruto's chakra." He scowled, "How the hell are we going to track him down now?" Itachi gritted his teeth then glanced at the sword on his back, Tenro, the Heavenly Wolf. "Do you remember what Naruto told us about Muramasa's Shizaiden? About how they called out to each other?" Shisui muttered as he too glanced at his Shivien. "But Naruto's Shizaiden, Hokuto Shishize, North Dipper 7 stars, is more problematic than it's worth," Itachi finished grimly. Flashback. Demon Incarnate. Naruto chuckled softly when Shisui told him that the old smith he was a frequent customer of was a fanboy of Naruto's grandfather. And then Shisui told him that according to Munchika, Muramasa was a great and saintly man but his swords were demon incarnates. Itachi crossed his arms, wondering what amused Naruto. "I assume that's because his swords have been used to kill so many people." Naruto shrugged, "Every weapon in this world was born to be soaked with blood, one couldn't be called demonic for what it does to its kill." Naruto murmured, "My grandfather's Shizaiden, however, are unique. It's one of few sentient weapons that exist in the shinobi world. Even among the 7 swords of Kiri only the one called Samehada is sentient. But your grandfather managed to produce 4 sentient swords, a feat that is considered legendary to a blacksmith." Itachi drawled. "Well, in a sense the Shizaiden have their own will, but that's just one part that got them called demonic swords." Naruto sighed wearily, "When used, they'll guide you to a degree, trying to communicate with their owner, teaching you how to use them." Itachi and Shisui nodded at that. They had realized there was some sort of magnetic force that guides them to swing their swords in particular ways. It doesn't sound so bad at first, but apparently those with weak wills would be consumed by their sword's stronger will and go ballistic for blood and power. Shisui gulped at that. Isn't that so similar with the relationship between a Jinchuriki and their Biju? Though in Naruto's case it was not that way." Naruto nodded grimly at that. "Yes, but I am not worried for you and Itachi," he stated confidently. "You both have strong wills, and from what I have seen your swords approve of your resolve, so it's unlikely they would try to dominate your will." "Naruto-kun," Itachi called, "if I may ask." Naruto nodded. "Who are the previous owners of these swords? And have any of them fallen to its power?" Naruto clenched his fist. "Yes," he confirmed, "it's because, when my grandfather tempered the Shizaiden, he was only told by the High no Daimyo to create the strongest swords as a gift to his fellow fire guardians." He shook his head. "At that time, according to Hakure, the only thing on Muramasa Aji-san's mind was forging the strongest weapons for the loyal guardians of our country. He was just newly promoted as fire guardian back then and hailed as the most talented blacksmith in his generation. He had no idea what kind of person would wield his swords. Namikaze Muramasa was the youngest guardian promoted by the daimyo. He was 18 when he was recruited. According to Hakure, in spite of his talent and power as both a shinobi and blacksmith, he was naive when he was younger. He was a kind and gentle man, and personality-wise, Muramasa wasn't fit for either profession, but he had an iron heart when it comes to his duty. But even an iron heart was not infallible." "What happened?" Shisui asked worriedly. The Jinchuriki swallowed. "For the first few years nothing wrong happened, or rather something wrong already did but no one noticed. Eventually one of the wielders became a traitor. He gritted out, his sword was furious of the treachery, and in its rage turned its wielder to a mindless killer and slaughtered his benefactors for the coup. Shisui blinked at that. Well, that's not so bad. Tahai no Kuni, yes. Naruto agreed solemnly, but witnessing the traitor losing himself and being punished by his own sword made the other wielders fear theirs, and they shunned Muramasa Aji-san for it. The daimyo was livid that his guardians didn't trust themselves or their loyalties enough to wield the swords and stripped the 3 guardians who threw away their ownership of the Shizaiden of their positions. The previous daimyo himself was wary of the Shizaiden since they're not just weapons but sentient ones at that. Even so, he made a mistake and gave one of the Shizaiden to his first son, hoping to mend their strained relationship because he preferred his second son who was more talented and wise. Itachi frowned. It didn't. The sword killed his first son. Itachi guessed. Naruto nodded. Maybe that was the daimyo's true intention, testing his son's loyalty. He sighed wearily. Muramasa Aji-san was devastated that his sword was used by the daimyo to kill his own son, so he requested to retire from his position and begged the daimyo to let him bring the Shizaiden back to Konoha with him. Whoa! Shisui gasped. That's a pretty big request. Why did the daimyo GTV in and let Muramasa and his Shizaiden go? The previous daimyo was fond of Muramasa Aji-san, and after everything, he didn't have the heart to force him to stay. However, he had one last request. Naruto waved his forefinger. He requested Muramasa Aji-san to leave one of the Shizaiden with him, a spear called Hokuraku Shimen, the Shizaiden that took his son's life. Wow! Shisui mouthed. I don't know if the previous daimyo was being stupid or awesome. No normal person would want the spear that killed their son to be anywhere near them. Naruto shrugged. That's why we have 3 Shizaiden in the tower. Hokuraku Shimen is with the daimyo's family. It became their family heirloom. Aji-san was desperate to get away from the daimyo's court as he couldn't bear to see betrayed looks on his comrades' faces, that they thought. He created Shizaiden with the purpose of testing their loyalty in mind, putting a leash on them, while in reality what the Shizaiden did to their traitorous wielders was on their own accord as swords that were forged for the loyal guardians of this country. I see. Itachi murmured, then glanced at the sword Naruto had on his table. So this is the last Shizaiden in the tower's possession. Naruto nodded grimly. 2 of the Shizaiden took a liking to certain families. Hokuraku Shimen stayed with the daimyo partly because it loved their blood, while this one, my Hokuto Shishize. Naruto gestured to sword with golden handle before him, unlike Shivien and Tenro that had skin wrap as its handle. The sword was also as long as Shivien, and it was a 2-edged sword with a very prominent blue sheen on its blade that was a signature of his grandfather's swords. It took a liking to its creator's line. Is that why you hesitate to use it? Itachi asked. Naruto nodded. While I have confidence in my will, the moment I give this sword my blood I have to steel my resolve too. Itachi's eyes widened at that. Because you're of Muramasa's blood. Naruto smiled at that. I am his heir after all, that's why. Naruto wrapped the sword with bandage that had seals written all over it. Until I am ready, Hokuto will have to stay asleep for a while. The blonde seal master groaned as he surveyed the line of trees he crashed against. Thankfully he managed to reinforce his body with chakra in the last minute, so he had not broken his back upon crashing, but it was still painful. Damn, how far did I get blasted from the barrier's border? At least around 50 meters. Kurama, who had been too quiet for a while, helpfully informed him. How the hell did you manage to get yourself in this kind of mess? Again. The last part was said with exasperated tone. Why is this third Jinchuriki of his always getting himself in trouble? Heck. Mito, who was the wife of a Kage, had a relatively peaceful life. Even Kushina only got kidnapped once, and the daily problems she had were minor in comparison to her son. Naruto was already put into this kind of situation twice, and don't forget about the little problems he got himself into on a daily basis, which ranged from burning forests, explosions in his workshop, cooking attempts that come alive in his not-so-innocent and probably lethal little garden in the rooftop. The latter was undoubtedly the most dangerous, and in the off chance that Naruto gets it in his pretty little head to pull a Hashirama and make second coming of the Shinomori, Forest of Death, he was sure not even a Biju would venture there. How Naruto possesses a green thumb that could somewhat rival the Mokuton was beyond him, but he had a feeling it had something to do with Naruto's chakra and seals he uses when watering his plants. I healed your chakra coils, good job stalling time for me to do it. Kurama grunted. What did that old man Hakure say about using your special chakra again? Don't depend on it until you're 12. Our combined healing ability is not going to work forever for internal damage as delicate as chakra coils. Not my idea, I had no choice. Once I get out of this mess, I am going to recreate Hiration or something since getting stuck in the middle of nowhere with hostile company seems to be a trend for me. Naruto said mentally to his tenant in sardonic tone. Naruto crossed his hands as he blocked a jump kick from his left, grunting as he was pushed away. The blonde Jinchuriki gritted his teeth as he saw 3 root members surrounded him. They were wearing snake, hebai, lizard, tokage, and bat, kumarai, masks. All of them then took an offensive stance. They wanted to confront him directly, there's no escaping this it seemed. Naruto parried a blow from right as he ducked and slammed his elbow into Hebai's stomach. His second attacker gagged as the air was squeezed out from his lungs. Naruto somersaulted over his head to dodge Kumarai's kick, and then he threw a kunai that was enshrouded in red chakra. The said kunai embedded to the snake-masked root. Arg! The snake-masked Umbu's scream of pain echoed as he writhed in agony. The other 2 were dumbfounded. Why did their teammate scream over a small wound by kunai? While the wound was deep, a trained ninja wouldn't let out such scream. Their eyes widened beneath their masks when they saw the kunai oozed red demonic chakra, and the wound darkened as their wounded teammate writhed in agony. Kurama's demonic chakra was even more potent than the strongest poisons of Suna's puppeteers. The wounded man won't die right away, but the pain the demonic chakra caused when they invaded a non-Jinchuriki or anyone who was not descended from the Rakuto Sennin was immense. He didn't like to inflict unnecessary pain to subdue his enemies, but he wanted them to know that even though they had the upper hand in direct confrontation, he was not harmless. It was a warning, for them to stay away from him. A warning which was ignored when the remaining 2 charged at him. Naruto knew then that it was not going to be easy to deter them. Naruto hastily activated his Haikau no Fun and dodged the incoming right hook with light movements. He purposely let himself fall to the ground before he stopped his fall with his right hand and then swung his right leg in a sweeping movement that planted a painful kick to Kumarai's shin. It didn't faze his attacker for long as the man pounced to pin him down. Naruto threw 3 kunai which were easily dodged as the man shifted to the right and proceeded to pound him to the ground. Much to the root members' shock, Naruto dissolved into chakra smoke, and another puff of chakra erupted behind him, and the next thing he knew a kunai was embedded to the back of his head that killed him instantly. Naruto grimaced as he withdrew the bloodied kunai but kept his gaze to the remaining root member who wore the lizard, tokage, mask. If another shinobi decided to join the fray, he would be in big trouble. The reason he could handle the other 2 was because he caught them by surprise and he was not sure he could pull it for a 3rd time. He glanced at the storage seal on his bandaged left hand, before he shook his head mentally at the prospect. He was not ready, not yet. He expected the last surviving member of the team to attack, but much to his surprise, Tokage jumped away from the clearing and fled. Naruto cursed as he threw a kunai with an explosive tag to the retreating shinobi. When the smoke cleared and no body was found. This was bad. The next time they came back they would be more prepared for him. He had to find the barrier wall as soon as possible. He gathered chakra to his nose, wincing when he smelled something strong that numbed his sense of smell. It seemed they knew how some Jinchuriki developed a keen sense of smell and removed that asset from his repertoire. The sky. He murmured, since when it become milky white? Just now it was still blue with some dark clouds. Ki. He hissed, Kirigaku or no jutsu. Now they took his sight too? What the hell they were planning? He heard something, a familiar sound, and felt the vibration in the air, one that he associated with lightning chakra Shisui and Aizen used. His eyes widened as he realized what they were trying to pull. He jumped as his flight seals glowed, floating him 20 feet in the air just right above the cloak of mist. He winced when he saw electric current started to crawl through the air with high water vapor on it, though he realized that to pull this off whoever executed the Kirigaku or no jutsu had to have superb control over this technique or they would be killed by the lightning element attack. He couldn't stay afloat forever though, so he had to get rid of this mist first. Naruto was now really regretting not finishing his wind element training, but he had to make do with the crude proficiency he had. His nimble fingers formed 6 hand seals quickly before he descended back to that dangerous mist, ox dragon horse dog bird. Naruto spread his arm then spun in a movement that resembled the Hyuga's chitin as a massive ring of wind spread out from his hands. Futon, Shoujiki no Jutsu wind release, shockwave. The mist was swept clean by the shock wave of wind, and he managed to land safely to the ground with a soft thud. His eyes narrowed as he started to feed Kurama's chakra to his Haikau no Fun. Kurama's chakra was potent, and his young body could only handle a minuscule amount of it, but he was running out of normal chakra and it would take a while for him to recover. Fortunately, Kurama's chakra somehow managed to be compatible to his Haikau no Fun, unlike other body-enhancing seals that explode upon contact with demonic chakra. It was probably because it was engraved upon his body and used was often enough, that it became like a part of his body. But just to be safe, Naruto limited his time limit of feeding Kurama's chakra to 30 seconds, and after that he had to wait for 1 full minute before doing it again. But those 30 seconds would be enough to complete this one task. There were 4 lightning element users, all of them were around 30 to 40 meters away from him, at 2, 4, 7 and 11 o'clock. In 1 short second 4 Kagebunshin appeared under the cloak of chakra smoke and split to 4 directions. The original Naruto who was left in the clearing panted as tried to regain his lost breath, mentally counting on his head as he held a ram seal. Lowering the air pressure around his clones would allow them to move with unbelievable speed, but they won't last long. Kagebunshin, in spite of their solidity, was still a mass of chakra that could disperse easily. The lower the air pressure meant less oxygen, and while a normal human would have suffocated, and clone could only last as long as they could hold their breath. 3, 2, 1. Naruto counted down with a sense of trepidation of what he was going to do next. Bunshin Daibakuha no Jutsu. He gritted out. 4 simultaneous explosions happened in 4 different directions, and Naruto gagged as the memory of 4 exploding clones returned to him. This time he was sure his attackers were dead, because before his clones exploded they had pounced on their targets. The numbing smell had gone because of his wind element attack, and he could smell properly again. Naruto soon regretted the return of his keen sense of smell, because the moment he sniffed the air, his nostrils were invaded by the sense of smoke, fire, and the worst of all, the scent of burning flesh. His attackers were indeed dead, there's no way they were faking that scent. Oh no, you don't. Kurama snapped, the Biju's roar echoing in his mind. Don't pass out here, we're not out of danger yet. Don't you dare. Naruto gritted his teeth as he struggled to stay conscious, but chakra exhaustion was something that not even an Uzumaki was immune to. He had to draw more chakra from Kurama to sustain his body, but that was not going to help for long. His young body was already too tired. Ugh. His blue eyes turned crimson and his whisker marks became darker. He fell down to the ground, just in time to dodge an ink animal that came out of nowhere, but the animated ink was able to shred his left sleeve. Sai. He mouthed out with a grimace marred on his face. He almost forgot that boy was still around. He clutched his left hand, it was just a scratch that fortunately would soon be healed. Naruto cursed as he heard a roar, which no doubt belonged to Sai's ink animal. He also picked up the sense of remaining root members, they were trying to surround him. He fled deeper to the forest as fast as he could, dodging the traps they had laid for him. He didn't know how many root shinobi were left after he killed 6 of them with his exploding clones, but there was probably more than 1 3-man cell, not counting Sai and his brother. In spite of his position, Naruto couldn't stop a nagging feeling that something was really wrong on the back of his mind. He knew something was wrong the moment he started fighting with Sai and his brother, and when he fought inside this barrier. I concur. What's wrong actually? Meh, who knows how you humans manage your messes, though I got to say it's weird having only kids popping up since you got trapped inside the barrier. Naruto's eyes widened at that. Kurama was right. He was fighting for his life, so he didn't really pay that much attention to their age, but these root members were so young. The oldest he encountered so far was that brother of Sai who couldn't have been older than Itachi. That explained how they were much weaker than the root teams he encountered before. These teams are not the same as ones he met before he was separated from Itachi and Shisui. They were trainees of Root, which explained why he could catch them off guard with exploding clones while the other team survived. When I fought with Sai, I just thought he shouldn't be out of Konoha yet, not to fight me, Danzo should have kept his trainees out from sensitive missions such as abducting or assassinating a Jinchuriki like me. Kurama frowned as he heard what ran through Naruto's mind now. Great, so, the bastard sent his child soldiers after you instead of adult ones. I don't care why he did it, but I'm warning you. Don't you dare to hesitate. They tried to kill you. If there's one concept I understood about humans fighting, it was the "I kill you before you kill me" concept. Naruto winced at that as he dodged another swinging log. I won't save your ass for being stupid, you hear me? Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto swallowed. He knew it was inevitable to kill as a shinobi. He already killed, but it was still not an easy thing to do, and it shouldn't be. He didn't know how Shisui dealt with killing, but he and Itachi had the same belief when it comes to taking life. It was never a right thing to do, but something you have to do and accept as part of a shinobi's life. He and Itachi believed the moment you found it easy and thought of it as something right, was the moment you lost your compassion as human. Shinobi were beings that endure and make difficult choices in their life after all. He always appeared to be prepared for anything thrown to his life, but his paranoia and pragmatic actions were because he was afraid of being wrong when he decides on his course of action based on his own feelings. There was always someone's feelings taken into account for every action he took, Itachi's, Shisui's, Tori's, his parents', but never his own. He closed his eyes. Then as he opened his eyes, it was no longer crimson but azure blue he inherited from his Namikaze blood. Naruto jumped out of the lush forest, the seal he had on his bandaged wrist shone as he smeared his blood on it, and a sword appeared with small puff of chakra smoke. The sword fell to his waiting hands, and unsheathed it the moment his feet touched water's surface and ripples of water spread out. Naruto narrowed his eyes as 6 figures appeared before him, and on the sky Sai and his brother were preparing an aerial attack. It seemed Danzo had indeed sent a whole class of root trainees after him. Before you start attacking me, he began in the calmest voice he could muster, I would like you to know that I am no longer going to run or hide from you. He stated firmly as he raised his sword, the bluish sheen of the blade gleaming under the sunset. However, would you enlighten me as to why your master ordered you to kill me? He asked with a frown. My death won't serve Konoha's greater good, and Hokage-sama won't let him get away with this. One of them stepped forward and Naruto recognized the lizard mask, the survivor of the team that confronted him directly. We're ordered to test your capability Jinchuriki, to confirm your worth as Konoha's weapon. They answered, which meant Danzo wanted him to know the purpose of this assault. No matter how important a Jinchuriki is to Konoha, Naruto didn't expect Danzo to be willing to sacrifice so many trainees to achieve that purpose. And you're willing to die for that? I have killed, at least 7 of you by now, does their death prove nothing? He asked in incredulous tone. It's not for us to determine. Tokage answered in clipped tone. Then how? Naruto stopped in his tracks, his eyes widened in realization. It was not them who is to determine his worth for Danzo, because they would die serving that purpose. It was someone else who was going to do that. They were being watched. Damn. You idiots. No one needs to die just because your damned master wants to know whether or not I am a worthy Jinchuriki to Konoha. What does he know about Jinchuriki anyway? A man who trained his subordinates to be emotionless warriors couldn't tell the worth of a shinobi or Jinchuriki, and I refuse someone like him to grade me. Tokage as expected for a root member, especially one who was probably the oldest of the trainees Naruto had met so far, was undeterred by his exclamation. So you're an idealist, Uzumaki-san? Why would a weapon like you bother to keep your emotions? It makes you imperfect. We shinobi have to sacrifice oneself. Closing your eyes to the sunlight, distinguishing yourself in the shadows. That is the true form of ninja. He quoted his master. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that, and that's why it matters not to you, that your comrades died for something mundane like determining my worth. He asked in incredulous tone. While it's true shinobi have to give their everything to the village, it's foolish to turn your eyes to the darkness and live in shadow forever. Those who don't acknowledge their humanity are nothing but hollow shells that would destroy themselves and achieve nothing. Just like that man who called himself his teacher, a pathetic man who discarded his humanity for sole reason of avenging his fallen clan. He wished he could have seen what kind of face these trainees made under their masks, to see if there's still hope left in their eyes. Nevertheless, this is what we're set to do, this is our mission. I see. Naruto narrowed his eyes, then let us fight, but I will let you know one thing. He warned them before he popped up a soldier pill to his mouth. Soldier pills were not safe for children under 12 years old with undeveloped chakra coils, but he would deal with the side effects later. I choose to fight for what I believe in, something you should have done yourselves, that's what a true shinobi is to me. Itachi and Shisui gasped when they felt Tenro and Shivien on their backs suddenly shook, pulsing as if warning them of something. Well. Shisui trailed off, the good news is that our swords are calling for Naruto's now, but the bad news. He snarled at the last part. He is cornered. Itachi gritted his teeth in anger and horror, enough to force him to use Hokuto. He finished as he leaped to nearby tree followed closely by Shisui. Shisui cursed out loud, damn them. The moment I get my hands on them, I will use my cruelest genjutsu on them. He vowed viciously, emotionless cronies be damned. Itachi narrowed his eyes, my thoughts exactly, and with that said. He trailed as he formed 9-hand seal so quickly that he blurred through them in a second, Katongukaku no Jutsu fire release, great fireball technique. The giant fireball burned through the lush forest, leaving trail of fire in its wake. None of the Uchiha missed the 4 black blurs that dodged the grand fireball, so they threw their fire seal-powered shuriken rapidly. 4 discs of fire tore down the trees and the fleeing shinobi scrambled to dodge the incoming projectiles. But because Itachi and Shisui decimated the surrounding forest with their fire attack, there's no place to hide. Itachi narrowed his eyes at one of the masked shinobi, he recognized that platinum blonde hair anywhere. Shisui seemed to conclude the same, this root member was a Yamanaka. All distinctive clans, especially those with bloodline or hereditary techniques, would have nearly identical chakra signatures. Shisui was not as good as the Daime who could tell someone's clan just from their chakra, but he had been a teammate of a Yamanaka for few years, so Shisui was quite familiar with a Yamanaka's chakra. Itachi moved his gaze to the black-haired one beside the Yamanaka, his Sharingan spotting tiny dots of chakra on the masked shinobi's body. This one was an Aburame. A Yamanaka. Itachi announced coolly, and an Aburame. He didn't put it past Danzo to be able to worm his way to respectable clans like the Aburame and Yamanaka. Shisui scowled at them. How dare you show your faces to us? Not that I am complaining. He cracked his knuckles, as promised, you will be in a world of pain, and I will make it less painless if you get out of our way. Shisui. Itachi warned, he was as furious as Shisui was, but they couldn't afford to be reckless. Shisui fumed before he schooled his face back and calmed down. As much as I would love to ask no more than you to get out of our way. I can't ignore the fact that your master sent a Yamanaka to confront us, damage control just in case perhaps. Shisui quickly caught on what Itachi implied. That bastard Warhawk intended to screw with them and got a Yamanaka to mess with their minds? It was one thing to do it to enemies and traitors, but to comrades? You dare. That does it. He unsheathed the shivien and his sword was instantly coated by lightning chakra. Itachi, it seems they're not going to move anytime soon, so I am going to make them. Itachi narrowed his eyes, so it seems. He too unsheathed his blade, but it was enshrouded in flame. Make sure to incapacitate the Yamanaka first. He whispered, loud enough only for Shisui to hear, we won't like whatever plan they have with an expert of mind techniques. The Shushin expert grinned at that, of course Itachi. He saluted before he swung Shivien down to a seemingly empty air, Hano Akashira, fiery thunder. A torrent of lightning chakra jumped from Shivien and struck down the ground where the Yamanaka stood just a moment before. Itachi cut off their escape route, blazing fire bloomed out of the top of his sword and engulfed the 4 shinobi. Shakurun Entei, Fire Emperor's blooming orchid. Itachi and Shisui frowned when they saw the 4 bodies dispersed as a burning swarm of Kakaichiryu. The Aburame was a sneaky fellow. Out of the 4 of Muramasa's heavenly blades, Shivien was the oldest, followed by its brother Tenro, then Hokuraku Shimen, and the Hokuto Shishize he held was the youngest of them all. While all his grandfather's swords were temperamental to an extent, Hokuto being the youngest was not just the temperamental but also arrogant and stubborn, which was why it stuck close to those who inherited Muramasa's blood. Hokuto, like any other Shizaiden, desired wielders with a strong resolve, with strength in both mind and body. They valued only the genuine power of its wielder, thus using chakra that's not his own when using Hokuto was out of the option. You could be their wielder, but apparently lowering their standards was not in the contract. Naruto had heard enough gory stories of wielders of the Shizaiden that fell victim to their swords, and the moment Naruto was chosen by Hokuto Shishize, Naruto knew this sword won't hesitate to reject him the moment he was deemed unworthy, blood relation with its forger be damned. Naruto wasn't going to lie that the reason he never used Hokuto in a real battle or spar was because he was afraid his grandfather's legacy would reject his resolve. But now that fear was so far away, there's nothing to fear as long as he believed in what he lives for. That was his Nindo. In terms of length, Hokuto had a longer reach than Root's Tanto, and combined with its sharper blade, based on weaponry alone he had the better edge. His Chokuto clashed with the Tanto of his attacker, the one with mask of a bat but with different color than one he saw before. The second Kumarai Root member was definitely younger than the first one and much weaker. He pushed on and cracks started to appear on Kumarai's Tanto. Which was no wonder since clash between blades are determined by sharpness. Why don't you stop now? Naruto urged on, pushing more chakra to his right hand. This is a senseless battle, dying here wouldn't serve the greater good you worshipped so much. Naruto shouted as he shattered Kumarai's Tanto beyond repair. Naive. Tokage whispered as he swung his Tanto to Naruto's unprotected left waist, you have a bad habit of leaving your left side open when you enhance your right hand with chakra. He warned the Jinchuriki. Tokage paused as a sharp pain came from his right shoulder. The naive one is you. Naruto returned, who discarded your emotions and strife to follow orders without your own judgment. Naruto stated sternly, raising my left hand was not a bad habit, but because I am used to. He trailed off as he pulled the blade that was embedded on Tokage's shoulder, earning a small grunt of pain. Wielding two swords. Naruto said as he held two nearly identical swords, one shorter by one shaka than the other. Hokuto Shishize was an asterism that was formed by 7 stars and divided to 2 groups, 4 stars are called Tokai and the other 3 are called Tohyo. The longer sword he held on his right was Tokai while the shorter one was Tohyo. This was the true form of Hokuto Shishize. Naruto pushed chakra to his feet, which made the water surface explode due to chakra overload, which caused the Jinchuriki to narrowly dodge Tokage's Tanto from cutting his leg. It seemed they figured out the existence of Hikau no Fyun and wanted to damage the seal. Naruto swung Tokai down to the defenseless Tokage, but instead of aiming for a vital spot, Naruto shattered his mask. The other Root members charged with their Tanto drawn. Naruto ducked, then in a split second gritted his teeth around Tokai's handle and formed half-seal with his right hand. 3 Kagebunshin appeared in a small puff of chakra smoke, and Naruto could feel the familiar burn in chakra coils and distantly hear Kurama throwing tantrums about brats ignoring the dangers of going past their own limits. Great, Kurama was pissed. Nah, he would deal with Kurama's tantrums later, it's not. Boom. A loud explosion echoed through the air, but it was pretty far away. Naruto used the split second of their distraction to put a distance between him and the Root teams. Naruto caught the sight of smoke rising in 2 o'clock, it seemed Itachi and Shisui had a hell of a time sating their inner pyromaniac. Though in Shisui's case, he was blatantly a pyromaniac who used both fire and lightning whenever he could. Hakure looked ready to faint when informed that Shivien and Tenro respectively had grown to be compatible to lightning and fire element chakra. It seemed the old seal master had a bad experience with the Uchiha and their pyromaniac tendencies. Tokage looked unfazed by the smoke that was no doubt a sign that his comrades were in trouble by now. Naruto could see his face. Tokage was the same age as Shisui, with brown hair and eyes in the same color. Naruto didn't care how Tokage looked, but he had seen those kind of eyes before. He had seen it in Tori's, though it was slightly different. Those were the eyes of someone who accepted death. While in Tori's eyes it was laced with kindness, gratitude, and regret for not being able to keep protecting him, in Tokage's it was a plain acceptance that he had to die. As if death had to come to him just because the mission dictated so. His Kagebunshin charged to engage the other Root members while he chose Tokage as his target. He formed the offensive stance of his Kenjutsu, and then he charged. Tonro, Ravenous Wolf. There are 7 blind spots in a human being's movement, and in this style the sword guided the wielder, connecting these spots in a series of attacks that could cripple and then kill their opponent. Naruto scowled, If they valued their life so cheaply, he would show them it was not that easy to welcome death. Koman, Giant Gate. Naruto murmured as he stepped back, his hands spread out as he swung both swords in wide movement, sending wave of wind that hit all of them at once. Naruto was well aware he was forcing his body to its limits to keep going, but he couldn't and wouldn't hesitate. Rokusen, Jovial Life. Mongoku, Zenith of Euphoria. Renko, Clarity. Mujoku, Knight's Song. Naruto gritted his teeth as he forced his hands to form the last star of Hokuto Shishize, crossing his arms above his head, sending a wave of chakra above them which rained down, injuring the whole squad of shinobi at once. Hagun, Warriors of Destruction. Hokuto Shishirenjuku, Asterism of the Seven Northern Stars. Ignoring Kurama's protests about how screwed his body is right now, Naruto narrowly dodged Sai's Ink Lion while spraying the incoming Ink Beast with water in one swift swing of his sword. Sai narrowed his eyes at that. No wonder Naruto led them all the way to the nearest water source. Uzumaki Naruto had figured out that his ink animals were especially weak against water and unusable in rainy weather. Naruto seemed to have affinity for water like any other Uzumaki, but it seemed that while he was aware of it, the Jinchuriki had non-existent training for it. Which was why he opted to push chakra into the existing water to destroy Sai's ink animal. Then again, at that age to master one element was quite a feat already. Shin clenched his fist as he watched their fellow root members fell one by one. It seemed that they were still alive, but the last attack was vicious. Naruto from his observation used heavy, lightning-quick blows, which aimed to inflict immense damage upon contact. He was sure had the blonde been in prime condition they would have been killed already. Sai. Shin whispered, "Isn't this enough? Uzumaki Naruto is strong, stronger than any of us." He said firmly, "We should pull back now, there's..." Sai shook his head. Danzo-sama ordered them to fight and die to test Uzumaki's capacity, and we're ordered to observe Nisan. Sai murmured, "We can't disobey." Shin heard Sai's normal stoic voice had a tint of doubt in it. Sai seemed to have second thoughts in letting their comrades die in the hands of Uzumaki Naruto as Danzo-sama ordered. But the painter shinobi narrowed his eyes as he finished a series of characters that took the form of birds and flew away. Sai had sent the result of their observations of Uzumaki Naruto, and they would. "We can't disobey, let's join the fight now." And die as root shinobi who supported Konoha from the underground. Raijin Murain Lightning Web. Shisui whispered as web of lightning chakra spread out and caught the wayward root members. It had been a long cat and mouse game, and they had decimated a good part of the forest with fire and lightning in the process. Itachi craned his neck as he observed Shisui's handiwork. It took quite a while to round them up, and if not for their swords they would have been at a disadvantage. Fortunately the root squad had no intentions of confronting them directly, which meant that this squad was the cleanup crew who was supposed to deal with the aftermath of whatever ploy Danzo cooked up. It was by sheer luck they happened to come across this team, and managed to overpower them. He had known Shizaiden was capable of throwing a lot of destruction, but he didn't expect they could use it like this to such effect. Still. Badump. Had he been someone else he would have felt wary to hold a sword that beats like a heart, an abomination in a sense. Of course that was a normal human's preconception, to be frightened by a weapon that had a will of its own and not mindless to be swung around. When he placed Tenro near the Yamanaka's neck, Itachi could see even the stoic root shinobi was wary when feeling not cold metal but something sentient and emitting killer intent more powerful than its wielders. Itachi could almost see that instead of a metal blade, what rested against the Yamanaka's neck was a jaw of hungry wolf. The blonde had the same opinion it seemed, judging from how he looked at Tenro instead of Itachi who was holding it. "Itachi!" Shisui called out, holding a mask he had taken from one of root members. "Aside from that Yamanaka and one Aburame, the others are not from any clan I know of in Konoha." He shouted at the Uchiha's heir, "What should we do to them? We can kill the rest, but regardless of their affiliation with root the Yamanaka and Aburame, they're still part of Konoha's prominent clans." The Umbu frowned at that. Shisui was right, killing the Yamanaka and Aburame could get them and Uchiha clan in a lot of trouble. Danzo might use it against them later, while they had more pressing concerns now. To act rashly was not an option. "We have no time to waste with them, but it seems this Yamanaka is the brains of this mission." And he didn't like the implication of what a Yamanaka is doing in a presumably assassination/abduction mission. Danzo either wanted to wipe their memories clean or brainwash them, and he probably planned to overwhelm them with numbers before doing so. However, Danzo failed to factor in the Shizaiden's prowess, Naruto's seals, and how they were used to being outnumbered by Naruto's clones. One would eventually learn how to fight efficiently when someone who had superior chakra capacity and stamina fought and outnumbered you on daily basis. Itachi narrowed his eyes. Well, we've incapacitated them, and we can't afford Danzo to discredit us, our clan or the tower. Shisui snorted. I can imagine it already. The Uchiha's history with betrayal was still strong in the mind of old folks like Danzo, never mind his father had been loyal till the end. Unfortunately, there were no non-Uchiha witnesses that could attest to their innocence, and Danzo could skillfully weave this incident to his liking. Too bad for Danzo, Naruto had a well-deserved paranoia when it comes to him. Shisui turned to one of non-clan Root members, pointing at the dark-haired man. You will do. He grinned. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He whispered as a replica of him appeared. Itachi, let's go. My Kage Bunshin will mess around with them for a bit and we'll be scot-free. Itachi sighed at that. Very well. Clank. Sai winced when his Tonto clashed with the Jinchuriki's blade. His arms throbbed painfully because of vibrations from the clashing metals. As expected from a descendant of the Uzumaki clan, with brute strength alone, each attack he intercepted felt like hitting the strongest iron from Tetsu no Kuni. No wonder his fellow Root trainees didn't dare to clash their weapons with the Uzumakis. The Ink user had fought Uzumaki for less than few minutes, but he had to admit defeat inwardly even before the fight ended. While Uzumaki Naruto in a sense had almost non-existent field experience, his fighting style was unconventional and unpredictable. He was also a type who grew stronger in real battle. Danzo-sama once told them that, someone like this was the most dangerous type of fighter and had to be finished in the first chance they had. However, there was no such chance. Uzumaki's fighting style at the first glance was graceful and smooth, but each strike from his sword was a heavy, lightning-quick blow which aimed to inflict immense damage upon contact. Normally he could match an opponent with superior physical powers like the Jinchuriki with catching them off guard with his ink animals, but since he joined the fray, the Jinchuriki didn't even give him a chance to pick his brush. Sai was well aware that even though the Uzumaki was winning, he was not uninjured at all. There were numerous cuts and bruises on him, and Sai was sure that Shin Nissan's Tonto left a nasty gash on Uzumaki's side when he was distracted by Tokage. Their lizard-masked comrade also managed to land a hit on the Uzumaki's left arm, which probably fractured the bone. But the reason Uzumaki Naruto was winning in spite of that was because he kept going as if those injuries didn't faze him at all. Naruto struggled to keep his breathing even. It was difficult to keep fighting while ignoring his wounds. He had endured chakra coil burns for a while, and in comparison to that, the cuts and a fractured bone was no more than minor annoyance at best. Then again, it was probably adrenaline that made him numb from the pain. Tokage, Sai, and Shin. Only these three left. How many had he killed? All of them gave him the same eyes that say, just kill us and our mission will be completed. Some of them even jumped and shifted when he attacked, making his own non-lethal attacks become killing blows. What the hell had Danzo done, that they thought their death was for the greater good of Konoha? He shattered Tokage's Tonto with one swift blow, and then he held his blade against the older boy's jugular. This is pointless. He repeated with a hiss, there's no greater good in this senseless battle, I am sick of it. He expected a silence in response, but for the first time the Root trainee answered. To you it is. Tokage said as he grabbed Hokuto's blade, and for a moment Naruto was almost relieved, but the blade was pulled right in front of the older boy's chest. It seems you know a lot about us, which means you know what will happen in the end of our conditioning training to be a perfect shinobi. Sai and Shin stopped on their tracks, wondering why the older boy knew of the final test that was supposed to be a secret. Tuya. Shin called out, what are you talking about? The newly revealed Tuya shook his head. Everyone in this operation knew of it except you and Sai. He gritted out, I told them, or rather I passed a note to each of them because the seal will prevent me from talking. You know. Naruto muttered in disbelief, and so did they. He glanced at the bodies of Root trainees around them. They died knowing Danzo would make them kill their surrogate brothers as a final test to be a full-pledged Root member. Then why? Why you make me kill you? because death by my hands is more preferable than what awaits you. Tuya titled his head to the side, maybe, but this is the death we choose upon ourselves, Uzumaki Naruto. Maybe the first and the last thing that I know the reason of why I did it, as a human and a shinobi, not a tool. Is that so? To Root, shinobi is weapon and not human being. They were forced to throw away their emotions to become a perfect tool for Danzo. So death is your escape route? You gave up the life your master destroyed. Has it never crossed your mind to try to find another way? Blood flowed the moment Tuya pulled Hokuto's blade, slowly piercing through his chest. Unfortunately, Uzumaki. Naruto. Tuya gritted out, this is the only way we know. Naruto gritted his teeth, coward. Tuya nodded at that, I am a coward. He coughed out blood, who killed his own brother to survive. Their eyes widened at that. Guilt weakened me instead of turning me to a perfect weapon. I am a failure, our master deemed me as such, which is why I was sent to this suicide mission. Tuya. Shin breathed out, so. Sakura wasn't killed in a mission. Tuya nodded, it's a test. He coughed again. It was dark, cold, and quiet place. He was trapped in that place for days until he thought he was going to lose his sanity. Then suddenly he was told to kill his opponent and he would be freed and reunited with his brother. He was desperate and before he knew it he had killed someone in that dark place. Instead of became jaded and perfectly emotionless the moment he saw his brother's corpse, he was overcome with grief and guilt. There's no conditioning method that could yield perfect results. Danzo always had two results since he created Root and their conditioning method. The trainee that would be a perfect tool, coping with guilt and grief, their mind choosing to discard their emotions after they killed their surrogate sibling. And the trainee who failed, their mind shattered by guilt and sorrow. In the end those who fail choose to be killed in suicide missions rather than live as a failed weapon. So those who we're told, have failed to be full-pledged members are. Sai muttered in disbelief. Discarded in suicide missions. Naruto gritted out, then why those two too? Naruto pointed at Shin and Sai. Tuya shook his head, unlike us, for Shin, the conditioning didn't work it seems. Shin was even a worse failure than they were in Danzo's eyes, which caused Sai to be one as well. Shin had a strong mentality, and Sai's presence if anything didn't help. Sai was originally susceptible but Shin's presence prevented Sai from the worst of Root's conditioning. A pair of brothers in our ops is inseparable, if one is a failure, another is marked as such too. Shin gasped, what the hell? Sai and I are sent to this mission because of that. But Danzo-sama promised me that. Shin yelped when he suddenly felt jolt of pain through his body and fell on his knees. Arg! Nisan! Sai called out, running towards his brother. Hang on Nisan! Naruto scowled, Iwahazuru no Fyun. He had heard from Hakure that the pain caused by this seal was immense, and Danzo even used it on children. You better watch your mouth, the pain alone could kill you. He wheezed out then turned his attention back to Tuya. So, this is it for you. Tuya's eyes started to flutter shut, nodding weakly at the Jinchuriki. And Naruto knew that the moment he withdrew Tokai, the older boy would die slowly because of blood loss. Naruto let go of Tokai, and then used his free hand to cover Tuya's eyes while another was holding Tohyo close to Tuya's jugular. You're free now. Naruto murmured, may your soul find salvation. Naruto said sadly as he felt the hand covering Tuya's eyes feel the warmth of tears, and with one swift slash Tuya of Root was no more. Naruto. Naruto didn't know why but the moment he heard the familiar voice of Itachi and Shisui he felt so relieved, and his body gave in to exhaustion and injuries he suffered. Naruto didn't hit the cold water surface because Itachi was quick enough to catch him. The Uchiha's scion looked pale and panicked, just like when Aizen almost killed him. Itachi was such a worrywart, he mused. Then again at the rate he kept endangering himself, Itachi might get a heart attack soon. He swore that since Itachi befriended him, the stress lines on Itachi's face have only deepened. I messed up again. He coughed out, so sorry Itachi. Shisui. Shisui shook his head, just shut up Chibi. He snapped as he inspected Naruto's wound. He was no medic but he knew enough to know superficial wounds when he saw it. Oh shit. A fractured arm, and you also lost a lot of blood. Can't you ask him to heal you now? These aren't life-threatening for now, but you're in a lot of pain and a trip to nearest medical facility is going to make it worse. Naruto laughed softly at that. Used too much. He murmured incoherently, give me a day to sleep it off, and I will be fine. You're impossible. Itachi chided him, leaning the Jinchuriki's head against his chest. A fractured arm is not something you could sleep off. Besides. He trailed off, glancing at their surroundings. 1, 2, 3, added with the corpses they saw on the way here, how many of them had Naruto killed? Aizen was one case. Contrary to popular belief, the first kill was not the worst thing a shinobi experienced in their career in assassination. Especially since Naruto killed Aizen with unconventional methods, and Naruto was more saddened by the death of his Umbu guards to mull over his first kill and the political chaos that followed. Now however, Naruto killed these shinobi in self-defense, and there's nothing that would distract him from the guilt. He knew Naruto would recover, but the pain will linger there. And there are the two survivors of this mess, and judging from the situation they couldn't put up a fight anymore. Now that they had lost their masks at one point in their scuffle with Naruto, Itachi could see they were young. The black-haired boy resembled Sasuke a little, and in the same age as Naruto and his brother. The white-haired boy was a bit older, probably around 10 years old. Itachi was snapped out of his thoughts when Naruto sat up and turned to face the two brothers. What do you want to do now? Naruto asked softly. That was a simple question, but for some reason the two reacted as if Naruto just dropped a bucket of ice water on their head. We don't know. Shin admitted warily. They couldn't go back to Root after they failed their mission, and running away was next to impossible because of the tracking seal Danzo placed on them. Nisan, what should we do now? Sai echoed. The younger brother looked equally at a loss of what to do. He had been prepared to die for this mission, but after watching Tuya's death and suffering, he was not sure he was willing to do so. Shin regretted answering Naruto honestly. How could he say that? He should be a reliable brother to Sai, and here he made his brother worried. Then again, he really didn't know what would become of them. Shin's eyes widened when he saw Naruto walk towards them. His sword was sheathed, but Shin was not a fool to forget this boy was the one who killed their fellow Root members. What if he thought they would better off dead? Shin wrapped his arms around Sai, who was still dazed from the whole ordeal, and yelled at the approaching Jinchuriki. I won't let you kill my brother. Stay away. Don't come any closer. Sai was stunned by his brother's hysteric shouts. Shin was always emotional, but he never heard his brother act like this. Nisan. Naruto sighed wearily. In case you forgot. I shouted myself hoarse to convince your comrades from throwing their life away. What makes you think I am going to kill you now? Shin blinked olishly at that, and realized it made sense. The white-haired boy was unwilling to let go of his brother yet, though. I guess. Itachi and Shisui, who stood right behind Naruto in case he collapsed again, sighed at that. It was so Naruto to try to talk his opponent out of their stupidity, even though they tried to kill him. They had a feeling it would be a routine for Naruto. It seems unlike them you still choose to live. He smiled sadly at that. Good, very good. He laughed softly. I have a proposition for you. Naruto offered. You do? Shisui raised an eyebrow at that. Since Shisui had his mouth covered by Itachi and wisely shut up. Shin and Sai looked at the Jinchuriki, wondering what Naruto wanted from them. Shin didn't know why, but for some reason he had come to a conclusion that their fate was in the younger boy's hand now. Proposition? He echoed. Hope started to swell on his heart when he saw Naruto reaching out a hand to them. Naruto nodded. You have nowhere to go now, and you have no means to escape Danzo's clutches on your own. He stated solemnly, we can help you. The older boy swallowed. They were in a pinch now, but he was not born yesterday to be so naively accepting of help from someone they tried to kill just a moment ago. What's the catch? He asked curiously. There's no way you'll help us without a boon or sort. True. Naruto admitted. There's no way the Root brothers would trust him if he offered help without a price. There should be a price for them to trust him. But not at the moment. He informed them. First, come with me to the tower and we will undo your Iwahuzuru no Fune first, and then we talk. Sai's eyes widened at that. You can remove this? Sai asked in disbelief. holding his mouth unconsciously. I do. Naruto said with conviction in his voice, we're the makers of that seal after all, your master stole it from us. Shin swallowed, that was just too good to be true. I still want to know why you are going to help us. What will you gain from this? I would be lying if I say I want nothing from you. Naruto admitted honestly, what I want is your trust, to follow me. Sai looked at the blonde wide-eyed, looking at the offered hand and wondered why he wanted to reach out for it. Shin felt the same, but could they trust this boy? Where are we going? Sai asked curiously, and before he could stop his younger brother, Sai had grabbed the offered hand and seemed unwilling to let go anytime soon. Shin was still skeptical, but wherever Sai went, so did he. He reached out to grab the younger boy's hand, and realized Naruto's hand was very warm, unlike theirs. To the new world, full of light. He breathed out as he grasped their hands firmly in his. Danzo had trapped them in a shallow world of darkness, a twisted cocoon he created to his liking. The world out there was not perfect either, but they would no longer be emotionless weapons but their own person. This is their new world. Welcome to the world. Sai and Shin felt the warmth in their hands start to spread through their body. They were aware of the hardships they would face as the traders of Root, but somehow they felt safer than ever when basked in this warmth. They couldn't fully trust Uzumaki Naruto yet, but for now he would follow him. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.